For 10,000 years, a single bastion planet guarded humanity from utter destruction. It was a world where youths mastered lasguns prior to mastering letters. Beneath perpetual amethyst heavens, unceasing watchfulness defined existence. When Abaddon the Despoiler launched his 13th Black Crusade, his ambition extended beyond mere subjugation of Cadia. He aimed to obliterate it entirely. Belief outlasts even planets. Beyond the fragile barrier of existence, in the frenzied chaos where deities and horrors devour mortal essences, lies a gash in the cosmos. The Eye of Terror, an immense rift in space where ethereal forces seep into the physical realm and natural laws yield to the caprices of malevolence. Over 10 millennia, the Imperium of Man contained this monstrosity, not solely via devotion, despite billions prostrating before the Golden Throne in plea, but via the offering of one sentinel world poised at the brink of nothingness. Cadia. Its very utterance evolved into a litany of resistance, echoed through 10,000 years of grim guardianship. Not just a stronghold of rock and metal, but a monument to mortal determination, forged so steadfastly that chaos gods came to dread it. Chronicles locked in the Administratum's vaulted tomes recount how this sphere ended up at the precipice of dread, not through intent or accident, but via the inexorable design of stellar destiny that stationed this ordinary globe exactly where the fabric of reality demanded a defender. Eons before the Imperium's dawn, prior to humanity's starward voyages born of aspiration rather than despair, an elder force discerned the tactical import of this junction. The old ones, possibly, or some forgotten race ground away by time's relentless march. They erected obelisks of unearthly obsidian across Cadia's terrain, towers thrusting skyward like condemning digits, their function inscribed in equations unsolved for ages. Dubbed the Blackstone Pylons in later eras, these edifices mysteriously subdued the warp's furious gale in proximity, forging a slim band of calm enabling ships to traverse. A portal, unforeseen in the terrors it would eventually tempt to breach. As the Emperor's Great Crusade surged from Terra to restore mankind's stellar heritage, Cadia ranked as one among myriad conquests. Archival logs note the 89th Expeditionary Fleet subdued the world during the 30th Millennium's initial phases. They encountered a rudimentary human society already molded by the warp rift's nearness. None at that time foresaw how such adjacency would temper its inhabitants into instruments of war across the coming ages. Initial settlement advanced with rote efficiency. The Mechanicum erected production hubs to harvest ore deposits. The Imperial Army built outpost networks for order enforcement. Administratum scribes inventoried the fresh domain for the Emperor's accounts. Expansion followed the Imperium's standardized blueprint. The planet's doom remained unwritten in the yet unborn lines of future kin. Then arrived the cataclysm, the profound treachery. Warmaster Horus, the Emperor's premier heir, averted his gaze from enlightenment and clasped the perils his sire had vowed to shield mankind against. In his ranks lurked Chaos Space Marines from the Wordbearers Legion, who had concealed heresy for years. These apostates had covertly raised shrines and effigies to foul deities under Cadian earth, tainting the soil with profane ceremonies well before the conflict ignited. As Horus crumbled and his legions withdrew from the Emperor's fury, survivors plunged into the rift destined to become the Eye of Terror. Cadia, astride its gateway, emerged as the outermost bastion of the faithful. They crossed a threshold linking sanity and insanity. In the heresy's turbulent wake, while the Imperium labored to regroup, tacticians awoke to mounting horror regarding this world's imperative role. No mere acquisition now, but the cornerstone bolstering the realm's defenses. Cadia's militarization intensified in the 31st Millennium's opening years, supervised by the nascent Adeptus Terra. The globe's every facet underwent deliberate reconfiguration for its mandate. Mountain chains were sculpted into bulwark lines. Oceans were siphoned to form vast shooting fields, offering clear sightlines for hundreds of kilometers. The planet's bedrock received adamantium girders to endure assaults from planet-shattering ordnance. The Mechanicum, evolving into the Adeptus Mechanicus, poured immense efforts into probing the enigmatic pylons scattered afar. Though their precise purpose stayed mysterious, observational data solidly demonstrated the pylons' role in steadying the adjacent warp rift. Further protective installations were erected encircling every group of these towers, acknowledging their tactical importance despite the lack of insight into their operations. For hundreds of years, survey expeditions gathered information, developing numerical frameworks that drew close to but failed to fully grasp the core rules governing these edifices. If machinery and barriers provide a planet's skeleton, it falls to living beings to ultimately confront the shadows. The inhabitants of Cadia experienced a metamorphosis deeper than any alteration to their world's terrain. The original settlers were gradually supplanted via regulated migration initiatives, importing groups chosen for particular hereditary qualities, mental toughness, bodily stamina, superior ability to detect patterns, and immunity to warp corruption. Over just 3 generations, a unique Cadian physical type started to appear. A population biologically tuned to endure on the edge of damnation while holding on to their human essence. The most striking feature was the eyes, an eerie violet hue thought to arise from mild warp radiation mixed with genetic shifts in a secluded society. Far more crucial were the hidden modifications, neural pathways impervious to terror triggers, amplified stress hormone reactions, and minor tweaks to the mind's perceptual filters that enabled Cadians to face terrors that would shatter normal minds into insanity. By the start of the 32nd millennium, Cadian civilization had been entirely reforged to fulfill its mission. Offspring born on this orb stepped into a destiny fixed from their initial cry. They disassembled lasguns before mastering letters, absorbed squad-level strategies prior to basic math, and committed to memory the 812 established indicators of chaos taint before age 10. Schooling merged seamlessly with combat preparation. Every non-military endeavor yielded to the imperatives of unending watchfulness. Cadia's amethyst heavens, ceaselessly lit by the ominous glow of the eye, acted as an eternal emblem of the planet's role. Successive lineages were born, lived, and perished under that eerie glow, deprived of the basic solace of genuine darkness or the pure awe of unclouded constellations. In its place, they scanned the vortices above for shifts signaling invasion, their gazes fixed upward at the peril instead of bowed in hopelessness. The Imperium's religious framework acknowledged the exceptional mental strains of this setting. The Adeptus Ministorum set up an exceptionally robust foothold on Cadia, raising basilica strongholds next to armed outposts. Devotion intertwined with obligation, each bolstering the other in a practical alliance. Cadians didn't just profess faith in the Emperor's safeguarding, they manifested it via rigorous conduct and resolute offering. Their invocations weren't pleas for rescue, but declarations of resolve intoned to the steady beat of firearm exercises. Only in death does duty end. This standard imperial creed achieved its most refined form in Cadian ethos, where youths learned that their existences were owed not to personal whims, but to the Emperor and the realm he founded. Perishing in Cadia's defense wasn't simply noble, but anticipated, the peak of one's calling, not a halt. Records of the deceased filled enormous archival ledgers, serving less as tributes to memory and more as quantified tallies of the toll for ongoing existence. As eras unfolded, the Caesars of Cadia ascended amid the fortified terrain. Colossal urban bastions crafted not for ease or trade, but for supreme fortification. Each stood as an autonomous garrison, able to endure extended blockades, with ramparts soaring hundreds of meters and bases plunging into the world's bedrock. Avenues were arranged to form overlapping kill zones, open areas built to double as hasty airstrips for flyers, residential blocks engineered to transform into shelters mere hours after warnings. Kasr Darth, Kasr Jark, Kasrahorn, Kasr Tyro, Kasr Gallon, Kasr Sonin, Kasr Myra. These titles embedded themselves in the Imperial Armed Forces vocabulary as symbols of unbreachability. Every Kasr cultivated its distinct command customs and unit allegiances, all while upholding total fidelity to the Cadian hierarchy. Amicable competitions among Khazars were fostered to spur ambition, compelling each to demonstrate greater allegiance via proven battlefield prowess over empty boasts. Out of these bastion metropolises came the battalions destined for mythic status across the Imperium. The Cadian assault infantry, arrayed in their signature carapace plating of olive drab and khaki. These weren't ordinary warriors, but the incarnate essence of imperial creed. Every soldier and a woman, the result of generations of conditioning that forged warriors of unparalleled discipline. Departmental monitors determined that one Cadian regiment could match the fighting prowess of 3 from typical off-world sources. This reality showed up in the outsized number of Cadian leaders across the broader Astromilitarum hierarchy. Outside the colonized areas, the Cadian Interior Guard handled patrols, elite squads responsible for watching the expansive wild territories where those ancient pylons loomed. These troops spent years in remote stations, constantly scanning the enigmatic edifices for alterations or interference. They gained specialized skills in spotting faint warp disturbances, turning themselves into sensitive detectors that picked up anomalies too minor for machine auger networks to notice. After extended contact with the pylons, quite a few displayed low-level psychic abilities, but any such developments underwent strict scrutiny to rule out taint. The Interior Guard kept meticulous logs on every pylon's condition, setting standard readings and noting shifts across ages. While the Adeptus Mechanicus closely controlled the deepest arcane studies of these relics, frontline surveillance info got passed to Cadian Command as a vital security measure. Such teamwork, rare in the Imperium's web of mutual suspicion, underscored the vital need to comprehend these formations that somehow restrained the Eye of Terror. Orbital shields finished turning Cadia into the Imperium's mightiest bastion planet. A thick web of space stations, battle platforms, and explosive fields formed a layered death zone stretching thousands of kilometers past the world's air. The Cadian Gate, the safe passage route through this zone, could shut down under crisscrossing barrages from countless gun emplacements, each able to shatter massive vessels with focused blasts. Naval bases kept a constant armada on station, featuring ships built for long hauls close to warp rifts. Despite all these warlike setups, despite reshaping a whole planet into a bulwark, Cadia's real power rested not in walls or troops, but in an elusive trait, something beyond the cogitators of the Adeptus Mechanicus or the tallies of departmental ledgers. It sprang from the shared essence of a folk who dwelt daily under doom's threat, yet rejected terror as their core, who nurtured their young amid infernal views, yet instilled in them upright posture and steady gaze, who laid kin to rest in ground that hummed with far-off warp howls, yet sowed fields for yields they might never gather. The Cadian essence turned into a topic for imperial analysts and a murmur among foes, and near supernatural endurance that outstripped simple mortal grit. For almost 10,000 years, this endurance faced trial not in one cataclysmic clash, but via ceaseless erosive strain from constant raids and ruinous offensives spilling from the Eye of Terror. Every incursion remolded Cadian life, marking it, toughening it, yet never shattering it. Enemy tactics and identities shifted over the eras, but Cadia's reply stayed constant, steadfast defiance. By the 41st millennium, no Cadia-born soul remembered pre-war days. Their realm had endured straight or veiled sieges longer than most human realms had lasted. The rhythm of onslaught and mend, raise and restore, wove so deeply into their being that lulls after big chaos surges felt not like calm, but like gearing up for the coming storm. Cadians shunned dreams of war's close. Such ideas suited cushier planets where folks could indulge in hope. They aimed simply to endure where others crumbled. The Blackstone pylons, those primeval riddles that first lured humanity here, stayed central to Cadian war plans through the Vigil's endless span. Even as their core secrets baffled top-tech priests, hard data proved their key part in steadying the Cadian Gate. Chaos breakthrough trends lined up with detectable swings in pylon output, botched invasions tied to spikes in pylon vigor, wins against Cadia's lines always hit during pylon weakness signals. Over time, a mutual bond grew between these Xenos relics and the mortal guardians who shielded. They protected these enigmatic structures without truly grasping their secrets. Cadian military strategy shifted over time to place the safeguarding of these pylons at the forefront of every decision. Leaders of regiments grew adept at reading shifts in the purple lights dancing in the sky as signs of the pylon's condition, reshaping their forces according to skyborne signs that found no mention in conventional Astra Militarum manuals. The Inner Guard devised ceremonies that authorities nominally condemned as bordering on heresy, yet quietly allowed for their proven results in steadying pylon operations amid surges in warp turbulence. No one could have foreseen it, not the highest-ranking tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, nor the most visionary psychers of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica, that the pylons were deteriorating. Not in an abrupt or disastrous manner, but through the slow, relentless creep of decay, eroding mechanisms built to endure ages, though not forever. Tiny cracks propagated within the crystal lattices hidden kilometers under the ground. Quantum-linked energies, powered by tech from an era before humanity's earliest ventures past its cradle world, faded by the tiniest degrees across each era. The precise resonances that enabled these edifices to enforce the rules of real space over the chaotic immaterium became subtly, unnoticeably out of tune. For 10,000 years, Cadia served as the Imperium's steadfast barrier against the amassed powers of chaos. For 10,000 years, successive waves of Cadians were born, lived, and perished, upholding a planet whose sole reason for being was its defense. For 10,000 years, those primordial pylons restrained the unending flood of insanity, forever poised to swallow the physical realm. Yet no creation of flesh, nor of the elder races that came before it, can persist unaltered through infinity. Cadia's ultimate trial of steadfastness loomed not like a fierce gale, but as the inevitable peak of mechanisms ignited at the dawn of their watch. The 13th occasion saw Abaddon the Despoiler burst from the Eye of Terror, commanding the greatest chaos horde ever chronicled in Imperial annals. He arrived armed with insights gathered from 12 prior incursions, insights into flaws in Cadia's fortifications, rhythms in the Imperium's countermeasures, and above all, the genuine role and intent of the Blackstone pylons, insights that elevated a potential brutal raid into an event of utter finality. Still, that doomsday outcome lingered unwritten as the 41st millennium neared its close. Cadia endured, its inhabitants upheld their watchfulness. The pylons continued exerting their arcane sway over existence's weave. The guardian at the precipice had survived all prior tempests. No soul on that bastion planet imagined their era would mark the close of the 10,000-year vigil. No one realized that later Imperial chroniclers would regard their period as Cadia's concluding act. The planet that held firm until it shattered, its collapse rending the Imperium asunder and birthing an epic of unmatched shadow. No one anticipated that their world, forged as an unyielding barrier, would at last confront the unstoppable momentum it was meant to defy. Such truths stayed mercifully hidden from those destined to confront the finale. They pressed on with their readiness, embodying the somber resolve of their forebears, oblivious that theirs alone, out of endless Cadian lineages, would falter in the holy charge. Oblivious that even in that shortfall, their last defiance would forge myths of valor, fueling defiance throughout a fractured imperium for ages ahead. For though planets perish, belief persists. Though strongholds crumble, obligation lingers. And though Cadia would ultimately shatter in body, the essence it embodied would gain a form of eternal life in the rallying call resounding over myriad worlds in the shadowed times to come. Cadia stands, duty surpasses recollection. A 10,000-year span of unyielding watch defies simple timelines. Existence bends uniquely on a realm where each cohort enters life expecting a warrior's death, where tranquility lingers merely as a distant dogma in forgotten scriptures. On Cadia, duration unfolded not by Terran calendars, but in the lulls amid assaults, in the fleeting breaths dividing one onslaught from the subsequent. The hardening of body and soul in those pauses proved as vital to Cadia's survival as any barrier of Ferrocrete and Plastile. The bastion metropolises of Cadia, the Grand Castra overseeing the ordered terrain, developed across countless ages through hard-won knowledge. Every incursion from the Eye of Terror imparted harsh wisdom, etched in gore and flames. Every rebuilding wove those teachings into enduring stone. The initial fortifications from the 31st millennium adhered to conventional imperial army blueprints. However, by the 32nd millennium, unique Cadian building strategies had taken shape, emphasizing not just fortification, but flexibility against the bizarre threats emerging from the Eye. Cassar, reconstructed on 8 occasions throughout the ages, stood as the ultimate achievement of this progression. Its perimeter barriers towered 300 meters over the flawlessly smoothed apron encircling it, denying any shelter to advancing enemies. These barriers, measuring 30 meters across at their slimmest sections, housed not mere reinforced concrete, but segmented compartments packed with sacrificial substances crafted to soak up and scatter blasts from both traditional arms and chaotic energies. Interwoven among these segments were a maze of passageways and combat stations, enabling guards to persist in combat should parts of the barrier be penetrated. Surpassing the material aspects were the spiritual ones. The Ecclesiarchy and Adeptus Mechanicus joined forces to sanctify Cadian strongholds in ways unmatched anywhere else in the Imperium. Clerics of the Ministorum anointed each rock prior to its installation, as machinists wove tiny devotional circuits into the entire framework. Hexagrammic sigils were fused into the base designs, and holy unguents blended into the alloys that bound the ceramite. Debates among theologians persisted on whether these rituals truly shielded against demonic incursions, yet their boost to the morale of the garrison proved immeasurable. The roadways inside the Cassars adhered to precise layouts that scholars of warfare across the Imperium examined with deep respect. Every element served a strategic role. Housing units for residents included bolstered edges aligned to form overlapping arcs of fire along principal avenues. Open squares functioned simultaneously as pads for Valkyrie dropships. Their ornamental basins hid stocks of promethium for quick replenishment. Sewer networks, too, were engineered for combat utility, with entryways matched to preset barrage targets for swiftly neutralizing intruders without needing much coordination. The tactics for city fighting that arose in these bastion metropolises gained fame Imperium-wide as the Cadian Doctrine. This approach proved so potent that it spread to other planets, even with the extensive adaptations needed for local conditions. Officers from Cadia, assigned to the Departamento Munitorum as consultants, fetched top compensation. Their knowledge of fortified city defense deemed invaluable when a spire city braced for assault. Spanning the Cassars lay the carefully groomed no-man's lands of the Cadian Badlands. Terrain elements had been altered ages ago to fulfill battlefield needs, fashioning environs where each hillock, hollow, and stream aided in protective setups. Woodlands were planted in orderly arrays, their flora engineered for swift regrowth following unavoidable fires, offering fresh screening for troops, while their exact arrangement stripped away hiding spots for foes unacquainted with the area's contours. The Cadian Interior Guard swept these in-between areas with relentless precision, overseeing a web of fortified posts from which they watched both the venerable obelisks and the paths to key settlements. These troops embraced Spartan existences beyond even Cadian norms, frequently enduring years without stepping into a Cassar, growing so in sync with their watch area's natural pulses that they spotted irregularities beyond the reach of sensor gear. Numerous gained an acute awareness of chaotic disturbances, a quality closely observed by embedded commissars for hints of taint, but prized for its advance alerts. In this fortified setting, Cadian culture fostered unique traditions that bolstered their warrior ethos. Foremost among them was the youth indoctrination process, starting right at infancy. Freshly born babies underwent gentle hypnotic exposure, their forming psyches subjected to hidden battle cues and devotion to the emperor from the cradle onward. Once mobile, Cadian youngsters launched into the initial phase of perpetual armed service drills. The White Shields marked the official enrollment of Cadian adolescents into their planet's safeguarding efforts. At puberty's onset, all Cadia-born individuals, irrespective of talent or birth rank, joined this unit for at least a 2-year stint of rigorous drills. They donned helmets, split between white and Cadian green, denoting their in-between role. No longer mere folk, yet shy of complete warriors. The pale side turned the full Cadian green only after they had spilled foe blood, a ceremony that shifted youths to guardians in deed and ritual alike. White shield regimens developed across over thousands of years. The Cadian training regimen evolved, drawing on insights from every Black Crusade and numerous minor invasions. At its core, the approach stayed the same. Subject recruits to manage terrors to build immunity to the mental scars of true chaos clashes. Practice areas featured rooms with regulated warp ripples, overseen by rigorous psychic oversight, letting young trainees feel the bewildering twists of warped space without danger of real taint. Altered servitors mimicking diverse chaos foes battled novices in drills with weapons that hurt but didn't kill, drilling them to push past the jolt of facing alien forms and gravity-bending actions that defied standard physics. This mental hardening reached into all facets of growing up on Cadia. Schooling prioritized group solidarity above personal success. Lessons in history zeroed in on armed conflicts, especially cases where one person's slip-up had doomed the whole squad. Religious teachings highlighted the emperor's warrior traits, linking faith tightly to order and restraint. Leisure activities even got a martial twist, with favored games built to hone battle-ready abilities and unit bonding instead of true downtime. Such total shaping forged people unlike typical Imperium dwellers. Probes by the Inquisition over many generations verified that Cadians handled dread in unique neural ways, while folks from other planets felt raw panic against warp beasts. Cadians showed disciplined fury, driven by ingrained drills. Scans revealed clear shifts in their amygdala and prefrontal areas, changes linked to ages spent amid the Eye of Terror's pull and the old pylons that countered it. A few Ordo Malleus examiners privately wondered if this shift counted as approved alteration and whether it could open doors to specific chaos lures down the line. But those worries stayed abstract, since Cadian units always showed far less corruption than soldiers from anywhere else when pitted against warp horrors. No matter the tweaks in their mindset, these seem to bolster defenses more than invite infiltration. The famed purple gaze of Cadia, that telltale gene trait seen in almost every homegrown resident, turned into a point of honor and real utility. Healer studies proved these special-tinted eyes had better night vision and odd toughness versus warp-spawned visions. Even better, faint shades in that purple hue served as solid signs of warp contact intensity, helping seasoned commissars spot troops needing early checks for demonic rot. Starting as mere oddity, it grew via selective breeding and watchfulness into a living safeguard woven into Cadia's guard routines. As Cadia's role in the Imperium's strategy grew vital over the eras, funding for its protection swelled accordingly. Space defenses grew from basic watchposts to a full-spectrum war zone with scores of shipyard outposts. Giant gun stations, outsizing most Imperial Navy vessels, ringed the edges. Their huge armaments could hit foes jumping straight from the warp into Cadian space. Immense void shields guarded them, powered by engines taking up close to 60% of their guts to hold barriers against endless fire. Inward from these watchtowers and around Cadia proper, circles of smaller forts, sensor webs, mine droppers, missile batteries, and quick-strike depots layered the barriers, forcing invaders to burn through heavy assets just to reach ground targets. Tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus ran dedicated sky factories just for making and fixing defenses. Their output stressed quick rebuilds amid drawn-out fights. Battlefleet Cadia kept a steady presence in-system, bolstered at times by Gothic fleet groups when dangers spiked. These ship squads ran endless sweeps, paths plotted for top surveillance of entry paths without getting too routine. Custom drills for space battles by the eye-trained sailors to operate sharp amid the sight-warping tricks and gear malfunctions, in reality often plagued areas under intense warp distortions. Ground-level fortifications rivaled the orbital bulwarks in both size and advanced design. Vast macro-cannon batteries peppered the terrain, frequently hidden under fabricated landforms until primed for combat. Generators for void shields formed interlocking energy barriers over key strongholds. These systems drew their immense power from geothermal vents plunging into Cadia's core layers. Wider protective zones encircled urban hubs, Enormous barricades funneled enemy advances into designated slaughter areas, guarded by layered firing points. Though striking in their physical form, these barriers formed just the overt layer of Cadia's readiness. The support network fueling them stood as an equally staggering feat. Subterranean vaults housed ammunition and provisions ample enough to sustain peak defensive efforts for years, independent of outside aid. Fortified hydroponic farms, built to withstand space barrages, guaranteed ongoing food output no matter the planetary chaos. Medical complexes featured vast genetic repositories with civilian tissue archives, enabling swift organ replication for injured fighters. The Administratum's oversight on Cadia dwarfed that of whole subsectors across the Imperium, with a dedicated bureaucratic network directing supplies, troops, and data with unerring precision to keep the planet's military at full throttle. Prognosticators pored over eons of battle records, spotting trends in chaotic invasion tactics and crafting responses for upcoming threats. At the heart of this interconnected framework, the Cadian shock infantry served as the ultimate pillar of planetary security. Far from ordinary fighters, they embodied Cadia's unyielding resistance, humans tempered like blades via targeted genetics, relentless drills, and inherited combat wisdom spanning family lines. Their signature garb in muted olive, drab, and khaki tones, coupled with rigid ranks and ironclad determination, emerged as icons across the Imperium and further, rallying comrades while terrifying foes. Over endless centuries of unrelenting conflict, the Cadian Forces organization developed unique traits. Departing from other Imperial Guard units, their regiments preserved familial ties, with roles handing down from parents to offspring over countless eras. This custom, though breaching typical administratum rules against hereditary bonds, earned exemptions for its proven role in upholding strategies and group unity. Some platoon and battalion labels gained almost legendary renown, their victory tallies extending back through ages, forging warrior bloodlines that shaped a distinctive aristocratic ethos in Cadian society. Preparation regimens for these premier warriors saw ongoing tweaks drawn from frontline insights. The notorious White Shields initiations, pitting young trainees against unannounced real ammunition, marked the start of an escalating regimen that persisted across a trooper's service. Seasoned fighters received regular refreshers, weaving in updates from fresh battles to foster adaptability amid the entrenched caution of Cadian doctrine. Particular focus went to demon fighting rites, with personnel committing to memory the traits and weaknesses of myriad warp beasts logged from past assaults. The mental fortitude of Cadian soldiers earned mythic status Imperium-wide. Commissars in their units seldom resorted to on-the-spot executions for discipline, as ingrained societal norms enforced order internally. When such actions arose, they usually targeted battlefield doubt over lapses in bravery. More frequently, Cadians required curbs on their overzealous charges than spurs to push forward. This trait, chronicled in myriad off-world operations, highlighted the profound shifts in human mindset that Cadian martial heritage had instilled. Outside standard outfits lay tailored units, crafted for the perpetual strife of a frontline world. The Casercan embodied the pinnacle among pinnacles, veterans plucked from top-tier shock troops and put through regimens rivaling those of the Militarum Tempestus stormtroopers. Outfitted in carapace armor and armed with hellguns, they activated solely for the gravest missions. The Casercan forged unique tactical principles, centered on delivering massive, decisive power at pivotal moments. Their sudden interventions in endangered zones frequently turned dire prospects around via flawlessly timed assaults on foe leadership or key weak points. Another elite unit, the Cadian Interior Guard, earned far less renown than the Casercan, yet played a vital role in overseeing the planet's expansive untamed territories, especially those near the venerable pylons. These guardians demanded skills distinct from those of assault forces: endurance, sharp perception, and resilience to solitude outweighed raw ferocity or battlefield prowess. Over time, the Interior Guard cultivated their distinct customs and rituals, such as unique rites at pylon locations that blurred the line between approved imperial worship and borderline technical deviation. Officials from the ecclesiarchy and commissaria quietly endorsed these observances once data reviews verified their role in bolstering pylon stability amid surges in warp turbulence. Cadia's most esoteric group remained the Lore Masters, an enigmatic cadre of erudite warriors dedicated to safeguarding 10,000 years of compiled strategic and operational insights. Chosen for flawless recall and deductive prowess, these figures received brain enhancements under the watchful eyes of Mechanicus experts to amplify their mental faculties. Every lore master committed to memory countless combat setups, fortification designs, and adversarial assault methods, functioning as ambulatory archives of warfare lore, accessible even when links to headquarters failed. Scattered across Cadian ranks, the lore masters guaranteed that remote detachments could draw on the entirety of past martial expertise, tailoring time-tested strategies to pressing field challenges. Cadia's spiritual customs mirrored the planet's singular perils and demands. Although the imperial doctrine provided the core beliefs, its manifestation evolved into forms molded by the unceasing nearness to the Eye of Terror and perpetual conflict, a closeness that demanded such adaptations. Cadians highlighted the Emperor's roles as shield-bearer and champion, prioritizing these over the more reflective views prevalent in other imperial realms. Piety blended effortlessly into drill routines, rosaries served as round trackers, sacred chants synced to troop movements, and contemplative drills sharpened fighting readiness. Towering basilica strongholds defined the sacred topography of key khazars, their designs as fortified as any redoubt. Armament batteries hid amid vaulted pinnacles, watchpoints claimed steeple heights, and assembly halls converted to hasty medical bays in assaults. Inside these bastions, native clergy offered homilies that diverged quietly yet meaningfully from orthodox ecclesiarchy doctrine, stressing unrelenting watchfulness as peak piety and framing martyrdom less as heroic surrender and more as essential realism. This austere creed birthed singular holy writings across the ages. The Chronicles of Defiance gathered invocations crafted amid dire straits, their phrasing deemed especially efficacious against demonic incursions owing to the urgency of their origins. The Litany of the Sentinel featured call and response chants to sustain formation unity amid reality-warping upheavals, with cadences crafted to ground the mind in the physical realm against warp incursions on sensory clarity. The Book of Martyrs recorded not just the identities of the deceased, but also breakdowns of their last stands, converting memorial into actionable guidance for tomorrow's sentinels. Alone among imperial planets, Cadia integrated the archaic pylons into approved devotional rites. Yearly gatherings at principal pylon hubs involved ceremonies where ordained clerics applied altered detectors to spread blessed ointments across the ebony stone, a method that Adeptus Mechanicus scans indicated could slightly amplify the structure's reality-anchoring properties via unclear processes. Whether this stemmed from direct chemical reactions with the monoliths or from some ethereal harmony sparked by the gathered believers' fervor stayed debated, yet practical Cadian leaders allowed it on the strength of observed outcomes over abstract explanations. The unending brush with the immaterium shaped Cadian minds in profound ways that surpassed mere soldierly discipline. The planet's amethyst heavens, forever aglow with the eye's malign radiance, disrupted natural rest and slumber visions. Cadian rest patterns shifted to accommodate this eternal dusk through. Many people on Cadia cultivated the skill of entering profound relaxation quickly during brief moments, as opposed to prolonged states of oblivion that could expose them to danger. Visions during sleep adopted unique patterns, recorded by investigators from the Scholastica. Shared symbolic figures surfaced, seemingly mirroring the mental strain imposed by the Eye of Terror, interpreted via the lens of the collective human mind. In this setting of unending tension and unceasing alertness, the societal frameworks of Cadia developed distinct traits that emphasized reliability and efficiency. Households operated under rigid army-like pecking orders, with defined lines of authority flowing from the leading elders, whether patriarchs or matriarchs, to the smallest kids. Unions were frequently arranged according to evaluations of genetic matching and mental harmony, prioritizing compatibility over romantic feelings, although deep connections usually formed via common goals and shared trials. Procreation served as a tactical necessity rather than an individual decision, encouraged by extra supplies and elevated social standing. The idea of youth as it exists on other planets within the Imperium held little relevance on Cadia. Starting from infancy, young Cadia residents joined in protective simulations, handled weapons proportioned for their stature, and rehearsed escape routines until they became second nature. Learning blended essential fighting techniques with broader education. Calculations in math came via projectile trajectory problems. Verbal abilities grew from drilling and strategic messaging codes. Accounts of the past were shown only through the perspective of armed conflicts. Upon joining the White Shields, Cadian youths had already gained more battle preparation than numerous veterans from off-world Imperial Guard regiments acquired over lifetimes of service. This comprehensive immersion in warfare forged a civilization unparalleled elsewhere in the Imperium, one where the divide between non-combatant and warrior was merely a label, not a real gap in skills or attitude. Each inhabitant of Cadia, no matter their main role, upheld fighting preparedness and stood ready to grab weapons if called upon. Laborers at the manufactorum drilled swift reaction maneuvers amid factory cycles. Medical staff ran sorting drills on real injuries from practice mishaps. Artistic pursuits even adopted martial themes, with tunes crafted to sustain ideal stepping rhythms in paintings, emphasizing precise depictions of past clashes. Such a way of life could shatter a less resilient group mentally. Outsiders from the Imperium's other regions frequently wondered how Cadians preserved their mental balance amid nonstop strain. The explanation rested in part on inherited biological and societal shifts built up across ages, but also in targeted strategies for endurance woven into daily culture. Structured fighting games allowed outlet for combative urges in a safe manner. Group events strengthened ties via collective acts of emblematic defiance. Religion supplied a spiritual framework that reframed ceaseless conflict from mere agony into holy duty. Still, under these measures, the core load of fate weighed on every Cadian spirit. Being raised on that planet meant shouldering a duty unfathomable to those in more secure territories. Awareness that a person's life mainly acted as a fleeting shield against devouring terror for the greater Imperium. This awareness shaped a particular worldview, avoiding both despair and hope, but embracing a resolute insight into duty and bounds. Cadians harbored no illusions of ultimate triumph over chaos. They aimed simply to keep it restrained for one more day, one more year, one more lineage. Within that modest aim, they discovered a liberty alien to those chasing dreams of lasting success. As the 41st millennium neared its end, this load intensified. Minor shifts in the eye of terror, noticed solely by the refined tools of the Adeptus Mechanicus and the honed instincts of seasoned inner defense units, hinted at growing turmoil in the divide between physical and ethereal planes. The venerable pylons showed variations beyond established norms, their power patterns revealing rhythmic irregularities that alarmed the sharpest experts. Those attuned to the warp described mounting assault on their mental barriers, as if some immense enduring force beyond was pushing harder against the fraying shroud of existence. The Cadian High Command, made up of commanders whose total expertise covered millennia of guarding actions, identified these indicators from past records. Earlier, Black Crusades had followed comparable omens. Phenomena of this nature had surfaced in the past, albeit without the current level of severity or duration. Tactical evaluations were updated, military budgets expanded, and backup units mobilized from non-combatant areas. The sector's administrative council, acting on official petitions backed by several planetary governors over multiple governing terms, approved troop supplements exceeding routine outpost quotas, reallocating battalions from distant conflict areas amid pressing rival priorities. Nevertheless, as these measures grew more urgent, a quiet resignation infiltrated high-level Cadia command briefings. The analytical forecasts, accessible only to those with top-level authorization, left no room for doubt. The graphs, charting pylon decay, escalating combat strains, and dwindling fortification assets, converged on a timeline that foretold not whether, but precisely when, Cadia would confront an assault surpassing its ability to endure, a truth guarded strictly among the elite ranks. This information was concealed from even numerous high-ranking commanders to avoid undermining esprit de corps, allowing rank-and-file troops and ordinary folk to uphold their unending watchfulness, oblivious to the possibility that the load they had shouldered across 10 millennia could be nearing its breaking point. Confronting this unspoken peril, Cadia's unyielding spirits showed no wavering or retreat. Units upheld rigorous conduct norms that might appear obsessive elsewhere in the galaxy. Instruction regimens pressed onward inexorably, advancing recruits from novice status to battle-hardened status. Artillery emplacements executed practice volleys with robotic accuracy. The inner sentries circled their isolated routes, encircling the venerable pylons, logging irregularities with cool professionalism, no matter how dire their portents. Irrespective of the gathering shadows, the apparatus of opposition, both personnel and equipment, proceeded with the unyielding drive accumulated over 10,000 years of mission. The defining trait of these steadfast hearts wasn't raw power, but sharp insight. Distinct from the manic zeal of self-flagellating sects or the conditioned compliance of neural-wiped slaves, Cadia's determination sprang from a steadfast grasp of truth. They entertained no misconceptions regarding their situation or outlook. They entertained no dreams of supernatural aid or ultimate triumph. They merely fulfilled obligations as long as those obligations demanded, discovering in that bare honesty a form of elevation denied to minds muddled by optimism or dejection. Within this lucidity resided Cadia's genuine bulwark, not its fortifications or armaments, but its inhabitants' rejection of soothing myths or crippling pessimism. The mental resilience built via 10 millennia of adaptive trials, societal shaping, and hands-on trials had forged something unique in humanity's annals, a society capable of gazing directly into the abyss of damnation without flinching, not out of fearlessness, but from conquering dread to the extent that it ceased to sway their choices. This command would undergo its supreme trial when Abaddon the Despoiler initiated his 13th Black Crusade upon the planet that had thwarted his prior 12 incursions. The resolute corps tempered across 10,000 years of alertness would clash against the venom amassed through a comparable era of animosity. The pivotal query shaping not just Cadia's destiny, but possibly the Imperium's very survival, hinged on whether steel, however flawlessly refined, could endure the unrestrained onslaught of the warp's chaos. The resolution lingered ahead, yet the groundwork for it infused every facet of Cadian life. In each youth drilled to disassemble a laser gun prior to mastering letters, in each invocation uttered beneath looming ancient pylons, in each wound gained safeguarding barriers reconstructed scores of times over the ages. Whatever emerged from the Eye of Terror would encounter not just warriors, but the pure quintessence of mortal rebellion, refined through eras of offering into an entity that soared above mere biology, while still tethered to it. Ultimately, what shielded the Imperium from obliteration was no physical orb called Cadia, but Cadia as a principle. The conviction that obligation endures past logic, past aspiration, past any anticipation of success. This creed, woven into the biological and societal heritage of a realm born solely to protect, would survive beyond any tangible edifice. It would linger when ramparts collapsed and pylons crumbled, when settlements blazed and seas evaporated into steam. It would abide in the cores of any who remained, even should no fragment rest atop another. Cadia's iron hearts would persist, even if the world Cadia did not. The legacy of ages sears more profoundly than flame. Amid the sprawling archives of imperial memory, scarce records stretch across so many gore-drenched epics as the saga of resistance inscribed by Cadia against chaos's onslaught. 12 times prior to its last stand, this bastion planet withstood the focused venom of the warp. The shadow of Abaddon, the Despoiler's Black Crusades, became all too evident. 12 occasions saw the Imperium shudder as the barrier separating the real from the horrific grew perilously fragile. On each of those 12 instances, Cadia endured, scarred and resolute, yet every triumph demanded a toll reckoned in countless lives lost and enormous swathes of hallowed territory reduced to cinders. The inaugural Black Crusade burst forth from the Eye of Terror in 781 M31, scarcely 700 years following the emperor's confinement to the Golden Throne. Chroniclers of the Imperium mark this as the juncture when Abaddon fully seized the role of war master, inheriting the legacy of the great traitor Horus, whose downfall he vowed never to echo. The despoiler did not simply emerge to plunder or harass. He advanced with calculated intent, probing the bulwarks erected in the wake of the Imperium's restructuring after the heresy. Cadia, in the midst of forging its unique warrior ethos, clashed against an adversary whose malice had ripened over ages of banishment. Naval squadrons positioned at the Cadian Gate caught the Chaos Armada as it emerged from the warp, but none had confronted a force of such magnitude before. Warships that once displayed the proud banners of faithful legions now pressed forward, warped, defiled, and grotesque. Their structures contorted into shapes that assaulted the senses and defied the principles governing solid craft. Orbital sentinels captured the obliteration of 17 major vessels within the initial phases of conflict. Agonized broadcasts echoed through every Vox frequency, as if the foe relished broadcasting the sight of Cadia's downfall to its defenders. As Chaos warriors descended to the surface, they met ramparts that remained in progress. The mighty Khazars were then mere sketches in the earth. Their future grandeur existed only as designs sketched on vellum. Yet what the early Cadians lacked in built defenses, they made up for through the fierce determination of defenders who knew they formed the ultimate barrier. Regiments of the Astra Militarum, forged in the Great Crusade and seasoned by the heresy, though weathered by time, held firm beside the pioneers of genuine Cadian stock, those nurtured under the purple heavens and groomed from infancy for precisely this trial. Abaddon himself refrained from treading Cadia's soil in this opening ordeal, yet his favored commanders delivered tidings etched in the slaughter of civilians and profane icons seared into the terrain, discernible even from space. Whole communities vanished, their people reshaped into grotesque tributes to chaos or vaporized outright to rob the Imperium of their loyalty. The opening clash at Khazar Partox set the template that would endure for eons: valiant final defenses, strategic retreats, ambushes sprung from hidden vantage points, and the relentless erosion that defined Cadian combat. As the first Black Crusade ebbed away like a venomous surge, it bequeathed an altered planet. The remnant Cadians surveyed their ravaged domain and grasped, with unflinching insight, the destiny that defined their lives. Forces of imperial aid arrived to find a populace already restoring order, not in sorrow, but through stark pragmatism. Reports of losses were dissected for strategic lessons. Flaws in protection were documented with cold precision. The fallen received tribute not in memorials, but in bolstered bastions erected over the soil they had blessed with their blood. Time marched on through successive lineages. Recollections of that debut incursion shifted from raw anguish to archived annals to core legend. The Cadians reconstructed and grew, their society solidifying around the certainty of recurrence. Drills integrated wisdom, won at the cost of forebears' lives. City layouts adapted to counter the breaches exposed in the prior assault. The Adeptus Mechanicus, acknowledging Cadia's vital role, implanted enduring outposts to examine the Blackstone fortresses and fortify the planet's mechanical safeguards. The Second Black Crusade descended on the region in 597 M32, bypassing Cadia to ravage adjacent sectors, a tactical shift that Imperial scholars saw as acknowledgement of the strengthened barriers since the first strike. Still, Cadia remained vigilant while allied worlds blazed. Battlefleet Cadia tangled with renegade ships spanning various subsectors as Cadian units sent to nearby orbs proved the potency of their tailored drills against warp-spawned horrors. The web of surveillance posts built over the prior eras delivered timely alerts that preserved billions of souls, even as billions perished in zones where escape faltered. When the Chaos Horde at last fixated on Cadia proper, they discovered a realm reborn. In place of hasty barricades from the earlier raid, towering Khazars now dominated, equipped with tiered barriers and coordinated firing arcs. The inaugural Khazarkeen units, crack soldiers, W. Those meticulously honed training protocols, forged over countless centuries of evolution, had proven their lethal prowess against demons of considerable might, orbital bastions in the void, their artillery arrays, sanctified by tech priests and ritually anointed with the vitae of devoted martyrs, generated zones of annihilation in space that inflicted catastrophic losses on inbound ships. Once more, Abaddon refrained from personal involvement, yet eyewitness accounts described visions of his form looming over combat zones, colossal specters discernible even to those lacking psychic acuity, their mocking guffaws piercing through noise suppression gear. Debates persisted in restricted automalus reports over whether these were genuine warp manifestations or induced collective delusions of the mind. Their impact on esprit de corps, though, was meticulously recorded in post-battle efficacy data. The Third Black Crusade, occurring in M32, zeroed in on the venerable Adeptus Mechanicus Bastion planet of Hydra Caudatus, hinting at a maturing tactic in Abaddon's playbook. As Cadia braced for a head-on clash, the core offensive shifted to other fronts, a recurring motif in later incursions that compelled the Imperium to splinter its garrison assets across diverse regions. Still, Cadia endured fierce barrages from detached squadrons and expendable contingents. These skirmishes, secondary to the despoiler's prime aims, dwarfed in ferocity and scope the bloodiest wars on countless scarred battleworlds. A consistent rhythm surfaced with every crusade. Abaddon methodically gauged Imperial bulwarks with growing cunning, gauging reactions, mapping vulnerabilities, expending assets to harvest vital tactical insights. What some Imperial tacticians dismissed as setbacks or withdrawals, millennia of scrutiny unveiled as calculated groundwork, each campaign paving the way for successors, every seeming shortfall harboring potential for later triumphs. The despoiler, diverging from myriad chaos devotees, exhibited a forbearance enduring across eons, his loathing for the Imperium undiminished, yet channeled with surgical intent. The Fourth Black Crusade in M34, etched in Imperial annals as the Eleanor War, exemplified this refining doctrine. As the Chaos Armada hammered the Eleanor system, luring hefty Imperial bolsters away from the Cadian theater, a covert cadre of renegade Astartes slipped into Cadian space installations. Employing arcane tech and witchcraft that evaded routine scans, these saboteurs crippled safeguard mechanisms and tainted guidance signals prior to detection. The ensuing havoc demanded years of restoration, leaving Cadia exposed to potential reprisals that, intriguingly, never came, implying the raid prioritized reconnaissance over instant conquest. The Fifth Black Crusade wove the Blood Angels chapter into Cadia's bulwark weave. During Abaddon's onslaught against the Morcanium spires in 723.M36, Sanguinius's heirs surged forth with their signature wrath. Their timely aid thwarted an outflanking thrust that projections indicated would have unraveled Cadia's southern landmass shields. Monuments honoring this pact lined the grand thoroughfare of Khazar until its fall, the scarlet-clad warriors juxtaposed against the muted greens of flanking Cadian units. The sixth incursion in M36 exposed Abaddon's readiness to blend Xeno's facets into his designs, as Eldar corsairs were spotted battling beside heretics in stellar clashes by the Cadian Gate. Ambiguity lingered over true pacts versus fleeting pragmatism, but the shift compelled Cadian fleet strategies to evolve against hybrid perils. Doctrine planners wove in LAR assault vectors to drill routines, as Mechanicus savants upgraded Auspex grids for sharper tracking of the aliens' slippery craft. By the Seventh Crusade, when parallel synergies resurfaced, Cadian troops unveiled sharply honed rebuttals. The Eighth and Ninth Black Crusades, erupting mere decades apart in nascent M37, hinted at a hastening in Abaddon's schedule that ultimately deceived. Each thrust feigned at Cadia, while spearheads assailed the Ivory Portal in the 8th and Anticanus in the 9th. Cadian command, by then, a bastion of unmatched doctrinal depth, discerned the feint's essence yet upheld vigilance ethically, with billions in peril. The fiscal and martial toll these drives exacted on the Imperium, compelling parallel safeguards over sundry domains, unveiled a virtuoso grasp of grand strategy, shattering the prevalent view of chaos hordes as mindless frenzied. By the time of the 10th Black Crusade erupted in Arodiwon M39, originating from the Eye of Terror on the date that ancient Terran calendars marked as the start of the Millennium's inaugural year. Cadia's society had woven its unending war into the very fabric of daily life, in ways that outsiders could scarcely grasp. From birth, Cadian children absorbed tales of Abaddon right alongside teachings about the Emperor. The Despoiler's moniker wove into litanies of loathing chanted by toddlers just beginning to form words. His likeness, refined from spy dossiers, evolved into a universal symbol of supreme malevolence, plastered across practice targets in drill halls. His battlefield strategies underpinned the core curriculum in Cadian officer academies, examined with the cool detachment that other planets reserved for earthquakes or market fluctuations. This particular incursion zeroed in on the Helica sector, siphoning away Cadia's reinforcements once more, while the Bastion world endured flanking strikes. By then, Cadia's orbital shields had advanced to include self-governing drone arrays that could clash with Chaos ships sans any crew oversight, a breakthrough that shone brightly when rift distortions in this campaign severed comms lines. After 37 days cut off from the stars, when ties re-established, the Emperor's aid fleets found Cadia scarred yet defiant, its barriers humming back to life, and its citizens methodically tackling the wreckage. The 11th Black Crusade in M41 signaled a savage plunge straight at the Cadian gate, unleashing a horde of renegade Astartes legions backed by colossal war engines twisted so deeply by the Immaterium that Adeptus Mechanicus scholars invented fresh taxonomic labels just to catalog their warped designs. For the first instance, Cadia's weather regulators failed to tame the skies as chaos-tainted particles spawned deadly downpours over the northern landmass. Troops battled in airtight suits amid acid-laced storms that ate away at gear and skin alike, even as Forge Priest squads raced to halt lasting harm to the ecosystem. Across these 11 onslaughts, stretching over almost 10,000 years of sporadic doomsdays, Cadian essence hardened into a creed of perseverance, not triumph, since how does one conquer the timeless venom of the warp? But an iron-willed defiance, no matter the toll. This core reality echoed through every corner of Cadian existence. Buildings prioritized sturdiness above beauty, built to keep operating amid ruin. Farming stressed rugged plants that thrived in polluted earth and fast-maturing varieties to squeeze harvests from the gaps between catastrophes. Personal bonds followed utilitarian rules, valuing group endurance over personal ties, with wedding vows packed with clauses for if one spouse ended up crippled or gone. Still, under this utilitarianism thrummed a near-religious fervor, a devotion not just to the Emperor, but to Cadia as both idea and ground underfoot. Declarations of Cadia stands shifted from mere battle logs to holy declarations, woven into devotions and etched over thresholds. The world's survival amid ages of barrage by humanity's arch-foe stood as irrefutable sign of celestial blessing, solid proof that the Emperor's intent flowed via Cadian blood. This conviction buoyed the folk through ordeals that would shatter softer souls, framing their pain in a cosmic purpose that warded off utter despair. No one captured this essence more purely than Lady Castellan Maricia Ardan, who led Cadian ranks through the 8th and 9th Black Crusades. Her breakthroughs in strategy, especially the policy of orbital blockade fields that revolutionized fleet protection, preserved innumerable souls and set doctrines echoed in Scolum Progena halls across the realm. Yet beyond her military legacies loomed her intellectual vision, laid out in broadcasts to the planetary watch, meditations on ceaseless watchfulness that elevated cold duty to sacred right. "We hold the line where mankind fades," she penned in her famed 7th oration, not only across miles, obvious as that is, but on planes of existence. Past our watch stretches oblivion to all that defines us, the unraveling of structure, the twisting of intent, the warping of essence. Our guard duty isn't just tactics, it's foundational to being. We shield not solely matter, but humanity's idea writ large. In grasping this, we rise above foot soldiers to something the Gothic tongue can't fully name. We embody the edge ourselves. Such intellectual richness, might this apparent incongruity in a military leader, define the distinctive Cadian outlook forged over thousands of years of unrelenting exposure to chaos incursions. In contrast to other imperial subjects, who could pass their days without ever facing warp-born horrors directly, the people of Cadia dwelled constantly near the most profound dangers to humanity's survival. Such closeness demanded a nuanced grasp of chaos, not merely as some distant dogma, but as an everyday challenge demanding ongoing oversight. The intellectual framework for coping with this reality evolved in tandem with the weaponry designed to counter its tangible threats. Across Cadia, immense commemorative sites emerged in the lulls between Black Crusades, reflecting this singular mindset. Diverging from typical imperial tributes that highlighted personal valor or grand triumphs, Cadian shrines chronicled endurance over results, the unyielding watchfulness handed down through eras, even amid unavoidable defeats. In Kazajark's Hall of Names, one found no effigies of legendary figures, but rather exhaustive rosters of every verified death spanning 9,000 years. Etched in tiny script across walls that extended for kilometers, those who entered this chamber often spoke of it as both sobering and empowering, a tangible display of sacrifices too immense to fully grasp, yet performed by ordinary folk much like themselves. Yet these shrines could scarcely capture, and often failed to recognize, the more insidious tolls of 10 millennia under constant guard. Restricted records from the Ordo Malleus revealed troubling trends in psychological evaluations of Cadia's inhabitants across generations. Enduring nearness to the Eye of Terror and the Blackstone fortresses induced mental shifts hard to distinguish from ingrained traditions. Inquisitors noted rising cases of collective visions among unconnected people, higher instances of foresight events deemed noteworthy yet operationally inconsistent, and ongoing accounts of fleeting sights at the edges of sight, especially near dense clusters of pylons. Debates raged in inquisitorial assemblies over whether these effects stemmed from genuine warp taint, biological adaptations to warp closeness, or mental strains from prolonged dread. Undeniable, however, was their influence on Cadian combat prowess. Squads showed eerie synchronicity that outstripped what drills and signals could account for. Some troops exhibited foresight into battles that surpassed chance predictions. When probed by on-site inquisitorial psychers through routine methods, Cadia's residents reliably fell short of warp attunement limits, even as their actions hinted at subtle psychic bonds. These oddities drew scrutiny from the Ordo Chronos, whose focus on time-warping events led to joint efforts with the Ordo Malleus during the long pauses between Black Crusades. Their secret analysis pointed to minor time disruptions around key Blackstone structures, with detectable gaps between local perceptions of duration and standard imperial timelines. Though unverified, certain Inquisitor scholars argued that the pylons created localized time barriers, forming a quasi-stasis that insulated Cadia from time's usual erosion, perhaps accounting for the planet's enduring resistance through periods that would otherwise bring repeated societal downfall. Such arcane matters stayed mostly theoretical for those who toiled and perished in Cadia's safeguarding. Their lives pulsed to more pressing cadences: exercise regimens, guard shifts, upkeep routines, fortification practices. The gaps between Black Crusades, no matter their measured length, offered not leisure, but chances to ready anew. Every cohort received the distilled wisdom of those before them, embedded in regimens, guidelines, and strategies honed by clashes with the warp's foulest spawn. This heritage took material form in the progression of Cadian arms. Unique Hellgun variants from local Mechanicus outposts featured tweaks tailored to unmake demonic forms, their energy cores tuned to resonances that shattered warp-fueled bodies. Fortification designs advanced to weave in hexagrammic wards, which Ordo Malleus trials verified as delivering tangible safeguards. Protection from specific types of warp incursions. The renowned Cadian pattern lasgun, a staple weapon for assault forces over countless millennia, received minor adjustments following every Black Crusade. Its blueprint embodied not a fixed norm, but an adaptive countermeasure drawn from amassed battle records. The 12th Black Crusade, documented in imperial annals as the Gothic War, played out in the Gothic sector from 139 M41 to 160 M41. Although it bypassed the Cadian Gate directly, the conflict exposed Abaddon's fixation on Blackstone, the enigmatic substance that formed the pylons on Cadia. Scholars in the Imperium, sifting through eons of chaos incursions, uncovered a hidden trend masked by the immense timescales. Plotting the despoilers' advances over various crusades in both spatial and temporal terms pointed to a deliberate probe of Blackstone reserves across the segmentum. This insight sparked greater scrutiny from the Mechanicus and Inquisition toward the pylons that had graced Cadia long before humanity's arrival. Expeditions probing the inner layers of key pylon arrays encountered device malfunctions and baffling staff casualties, hinting at safeguards surpassing Imperial comprehension. Once viewed merely as handy tactical features, the pylons emerged as targets of possibly vital significance to both factions in the unending war, their actual essence and role remaining enigmatic. Unraveling this puzzle could dictate Cadia's destiny and potentially that of the Imperium at large. As the 41st millennium neared its closing eras, faint shifts appeared in chaos operations near the Cadian Gate. Orga networks picked up heightened vessel traffic inside the Eye of Terror, while distant observation showed unusual stockpiling at assembly areas just outside Imperial detection range. Astropathic relays noted climbing noise and ambient signals across every frequency, the telltale psychic haze of major warp upheavals. Tech Priest outposts recorded power surges in the Blackstone pylons, surpassing past benchmarks. The reliability of these irregularities ruled out mere random fluctuations. Taken alone, such signs worried officials, but together they ignited a full review of Cadia's fortifications at every tier of Imperial command. The Administratum approved funding beyond routine guidelines, elevating Cadian needs over rival demands from other battlefronts. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica bolstered the Cadian astropathic choir with elite psychers pulled from the heart of terror. The Adeptus Mechanicus sent elite investigation squads, featuring Archmagos experts usually confined to Mars and the most secure Forge worlds. Carried out with precise diligence, these measures echoed the Imperium's collective recollection of 12 prior Black Crusades and the gravity of a 13th. For Cadia's dwellers, these shifts felt immediate and tangible, not distant policy debates. They saw the bustle at spaceports, incoming battalions from remote stars, ramped up drills and gear checks. They sensed the faint tremors rippling through Cadia's bedrock as buried mechanisms stirred under preset warnings. They spotted more outsiders, Inquisition operatives skulking with clumsy stealth, Mechanicus experts shuttled to pylon zones amid tight security, segmentum brass touring native defenses. Above all, they grasped how these efforts realized the core mission their society had forged. Through 12 earlier Black Crusades and 10,000 years of watchfulness, Cadia served as the Imperium's bulwark against the Warp's focused hatred. With signs growing that the 13th and maybe decisive clash loomed, those bearing this legacy stood firm without hesitation or protest. They pressed on with preparations in the disciplined precision and steadfast spirit defining their people, every soul aware of their role in a multi-generational safeguard. Cadia's lore repositories, upheld with typical meticulousness amid repeated ruin and rebuilding, held scattered accounts from each past Black Crusade. Treated like sacred writ by aspiring leaders and strategy experts, these files showed Abaddon's tactics stayed true at their core, despite outward differences in aims and methods. The despoiler gathered insights per incursion, his plans refining in reply. Abaddon's response to Imperial countermeasures embodied a strategic shift toward long-term endurance. He committed assets to gather vital data, pulled back troops to safeguard strength for later engagements, and kept his sights fixed on overarching goals spanning eras that dwarfed conventional human timelines. This expansive viewpoint enabled Cadian strategists to spot trends overlooked by those limited to narrower timelines, examining the despoiler's offensives over thousands of years rather than isolated battles, exposed not distinct wars but one vast multi-stage campaign. Every seeming loss planted the groundwork for eventual gains. Every retreat conserved essential supplies amid wrecked Imperial setups. Every scouting mission yielded insights into defensive strengths, shaping paths for later assaults. Such insight reshaped the Chronicle from a string of Imperial triumphs into one enduring struggle, its end still unresolved. As the last 100 years of the 41st millennium unfolded, insiders privy to top-secret reports saw ever more plainly that prior Black Crusades served as mere setups. The ultimate aim stayed elusive, whether annihilating Cadia outright, sabotaging or tainting the pylons, or achieving something beyond even Imperial tacticians' foresight. Undeniable, though, was Abaddon's deliberate restraint in chasing this end over a span that nullified typical human schemes. A buildup of 10,000 years hinted at stakes immense enough to warrant it. For everyday Cadians, these grand tactics mattered less than tangible duties at hand. They concentrated on manageable tasks, drill schedules, gear upkeep, barrier reinforcements, supply boosts, escape exercises. Life's steady beat persisted amid the looming threat, their resolve unshaken by weariness or gripped by fear. They had guarded the line for 10,000 years. They would hold firm until obligation demanded otherwise, anticipating no total win, yet refusing total loss. In the purple gloom under Cadia's endless dusk, as build-up for the 13th Clash accelerated, the tribute fires flickered on relentlessly. These undying blazes, kindled from the inaugural Black Crusade, embodied both homage to the lost and commitment to the mission. Their glow lit the etched names of the departed on nearby barriers, not just revered forebears, but living mentors whose wisdom, captured in debriefs and regimens, still steered their heirs. Cadia's slain never fully vanished. They lingered in the routines they forged, the hard-won teachings bought with life, the bulwarks raised on soil hallowed by their offering. Defiant through 12 ordeals, Cadia steeled for its 13th test. History's heft bore down on its guardians not as a load, but as bedrock. The pooled wisdom and grit of endless lineages who had held this ground against the identical relentless foe with equal iron will. If the 13th Clash would echo past patterns or unleash unheard-of fury was yet unknown. Beyond question, Cadia would endure as ever, the ultimate rampart shielding mankind from the ravenous void, forever craving its end. Over Kasser, the amethyst heavens grew shadowed by eerie tempests as the 999th year of the 41st millennium neared its finish. Auspec's grids picked up surging warp disturbances near the Cadian portal, while psychic relays noted mounting static aligned with massive armadas stirring in the eye of terror. Distant watchposts fell quiet more often, their last signals bearing broken snippets implying surveillance prior to ruin. The timeless pylons pulsed with power surges, etching fleeting shapes onto their dark stone faces before they dissolved into utter void. In the fortified vaults far under Cadia's chief citadels, commanders pored over archives of the dozen earlier Black Crusades with fresh urgency, hunting clues to forecast the next one's shape. Adeptus Mechanicus scholars pressed frantic probes into the pylons, striving to crack enigmas held in their gem-like cores for eons. The ecclesiarchy orchestrated vast litanies in towering basilica strongholds, the chorus of millions in harmony drowning out the grind of fortification works. Across drill fields where generations of Cadians had honed skills to confront warp abominations, fresh recruits in white armor underwent their closing review ahead of assignment. The soldiers shifted into fortified stances, their features, etched with lingering echoes of youth under the stern control of their countenances, displayed the unyielding resolve that had defined their forebears through 10,000 years of unbowed opposition. They would hold the line as the people of Cadia always had, anticipating no triumph yet refusing surrender, merely fulfilling their obligations until life ebbed from their forms. 12 assaults by Abaddon had shattered against Cadia's unyielding bulwark. 12 times the Bastion planet had weathered scars that would shatter lesser worlds. The 13th Clash loomed not as a mere chance, but as an inevitable truth, the climax of a struggle outlasting the span of countless human societies. Regardless of the result, this battle would pen the closing passage in an epic of rebellion unmatched in the annals of the Imperium, a monument to humanity's grit, pitted against the raw embodiment of its most shadowed urges. Cadia had repelled the despoiler a dozen times previously. It readied itself to resist him again, oblivious to the fact that this 13th stand would diverge sharply from every prior encounter. The Blackstone fortresses, vaults of arcane mechanisms and intents defying the grasp of imperial scholars, guarded mysteries that would elevate a potential routine cataclysm into an utterly conclusive reckoning. Yet that insight stayed hidden from those bracing for the onslaught, permitting them to confront the impending doom with the steadfast grit that had buoyed their lineage across 10 millennia of ceaseless strife. The conclusion commenced in quietude. During the waning moments of 999 on M41, psychic signals across the Cadian domain stuttered and faded, not in the chaotic shrieks of warp tempests, but through a slow ebb, as if some immense and deliberate force were quietly devouring the mental pulses essential to imperial transmissions. Observation outposts charted the anomaly radiating from the Eye of Terror in precise circular waves, each flawlessly symmetric in a way that hinted at intentional craft over random chance. Inside this growing void of psychic silence, Cadia grew ever more severed from the Imperium. It had guarded its borders for 10,000 years. Lord Castellan Ursarkar E. Creed, overarching leader of Cadian armed might and survivor of over 100 battles, grasped the tactical ramifications at once. Positioned in the command chamber of Khazar Kraf, encircled by holoslates charting the escalating blackout of signals, he dispatched directives with the clockwork accuracy that had forged his renown among the Empire's tacticians. Naval squadrons were redeployed to uphold manual relay networks. Long-dormant contingency measures sprang to life. Obsolete relay apparatuses, preserved via ceremony more than anticipation of need, were pulled from locked chambers and readied for activation. These maneuvers proceeded with the synchronized precision hallmarking Cadian warfare. Adeptus Mechanicus tech priests fine-tuned extended-range auspex grids to pick up warp displacement traces from major armada transits. Orbital batteries recalibrated targeting arcs to offset expected signal delays. Assault cohorts cycled from standby to frontline positions per preset timelines. Every officer grasped their place in the overarching bulwark without need for direct commands. Non-combatant masses began tertiary relocation drills, driven not by panic, but by ingrained obedience to edicts forged epochs before their time. Over this web of readiness, Cadia's heavens showed mounting turmoil. The constant borealis veils that bathed the air in amethyst glows grew fiercer and veered into richer indigo shades laced with blood-red accents. Forge World sensors detected rhythmic vibrations in these displays, aligning with numerical sequences linked to surging warp turbulence. Far graver were the murmurs noted by sentinels along the world's rampart lines, muttered words in tongues unfit for mortal throats, evoking visceral reactions even in those devoid of psyker gifts. The Ordo presence on Cadia, perpetually robust due to the planet's pivotal role, swelled sharply as agents from various chambers descended to monitor and evaluate. Their shadowed vessels eased into high anchor with scant chatter, unloading operatives who navigated Cadian bastion hives with intent bared, despite efforts at subtlety. Seasoned Cadians spotted the signs from archived annals, the Imperium's covertest arm, mustering its assets not just to watch, but to quarantine whatever horror was about to spill from the Eye of Terror. On the 9th day, on the initial day of quiet, the earliest exiles made their way in. Ships from the Imperium, spanning diverse types and states of repair, shifted from the warp into normal space along the fringes of the Cadian sector, their exteriors scarred from frantic escapes. Halted by the vigilant patrol craft of Battlefleet Cadia, these ships relayed identical accounts, a creeping hush enveloping adjacent star systems, then eerie appearances detectable by ordinary eyes, building to colossal warp jumps that scattered chaos fleets in droves. The relayed messages, transmitted via sturdy Vox systems instead of fickle psychic channels, echoed with the raw timbre of calamity just evaded. In the subterranean command center under Khazar, Lord Castellan Creed pored over these dispatches and spotted the tactical outline echoing past events. The obsidian monoliths scattered across Cadia's terrain had long anchored stability in the vicinity. curbing the extent of warp incursions and hindering Chaos invaders from emerging straight into Cadian orbits. This safeguard funneled assaults along foreseeable paths, enabling the mighty bulwarks of the Cadian Gate to inflict devastating losses. The ongoing surge of incidents hinted that this core edge could be eroding. By the 12th day of quiet, aid started flowing from nearby regions. The Administratum's higher echelons, grasping the dire peril of Acadian gatefall, summoned contingents from various Space Marine chapters to fortify the planet's ramparts. Assault capsules blazed across the purple heavens, unloading Astartes clad in the liveries of the Dark Angels, Imperial Fists, Black Templars, and many other chapters whose emblems evoked respect even from the grim Cadian ranks. These superhuman fighters assumed posts at vital strongholds, offering not just combat edge, but a morale boost to soldiers aware of what such arrivals meant. The Adeptus Mechanicus ramped up their footprint too, albeit through subtler and more arcane efforts. Dedicated survey craft took up stations near key pylon arrays, as enginseer teams ramped up probes into the timeless edifices. Their ritualistic devices picked up spikes in the pylon's power outflows beyond recorded norms, shifts that aligned with the growing bubble of psychic void and pointed to meddling with the structure's core roles. Such discoveries stayed locked to top security tiers, yet the surged bustle at pylon zones signaled gravity without needing overt disclosure. The Ecclesiarchy didn't send fresh troops, but amplified their ongoing role. Cadia's grand basilica bastions, those colossal shrine fortresses built for both sanctity and siege, turned into hubs of endless litanies, run in shifts for ceaseless devotion. The chorus of countless voices in flawless harmony reverberated over war-torn plains, underscoring the disciplined buildup happening below. Debates raged on whether these rites swayed fates via otherworldly forces or just fortified resolve, but amid the chaos onslaught, such questions held no sway. Belief served as solid armor alongside lasguns and barrages. Legios of Imperial Titans pulled from battles in sundry sectors lumbered in to shore up key barricades. These colossal engines, dwarfing the vast fortifications of Cadia's Khazars, stationed themselves at vital narrows where their immense ordnance could wreak havoc most efficiently. Beyond raw battlefield gain, their arrival uplifted Imperial spirits as embodiments of the Omnissiah's vigil. To foes, they loomed as barriers demanding outsized costs for scant reward. Their venerable cogitators, moody and venerable, appeared to react to the mounting warp turmoil with fiercer zeal, their fusion hearts pulsing hotter even in idle mode. Come the 18th day of quiet, the inaugural strike emerged, not along the anticipated routes watched by Battlefleet Cadia, but from the world's own core. Across 17 sites at once, the fabric of existence tore open via warp rifts, positioned with exacting intent, away from dense settlements but amid essential network hubs. Through these gashes in reality surged chaos hordes flaunting the Black Legion's dread symbols. Their advances betrayed not blind rage, but a calculated pursuit of set goals. The coordinated timing and accuracy of these incursions revealed a scheme, discipline, and restraint among the invaders stood in stark contrast to the typical Imperial view of chaos armies as inherently chaotic and unruly. The Cadia defenders reacted with matching accuracy. Their strategies, drawn from in-depth studies of past Black Crusades and refined via ongoing drills, sprang into action the moment the invasion's key details were verified. Cadian assault squads launched from Valkyrie transports exactly 7 minutes following the first appearances. These units aimed to shatter the foe's efforts to dig in before solid footholds formed. Pre-sighted artillery units unleashed barrages on probable emergence sites, adhering to protocols even amid the shock of numerous breaches erupting at once in scattered areas. Over 37 hours, fierce battles unfolded at these 17 invasion sites. The Black Legion's pent-up malice, nurtured through 10,000 years of banishment, clashed against the honed rigor of Cadia's guardians, forged by a matching era of unyielding watchfulness. Both factions battled without the panic of the caught off guard. This clash had been foreseen by each over timescales that dwarfed personal existences in the grand tactical scheme. The attackers advanced with calculated intent instead of wild rage, hinting at guidance from sources versed in Cadia's defensive tactics and equipped with tailored countermeasures. By the battle's end, Imperial troops had sealed off 16 of the 17 entryways. The lone holdout, in a remote zone under the Interior Guard's watch, grew despite heavy shelling from cannons and multiple Valkyrie runs. Later reviews revealed this spot aligned with an overlooked minor pylon hub absent from routine mechanicum mappings, implying the enemy chose it using data beyond the reach of Imperial strategists. When Space Marine support reached the scene from Kasser, the Chaos intruders had already secured a strong defensive line and started some ritual on the pylon array. A ritual halted yet not fully stopped by the ultimate Imperial lockdown. This opening strike served only as an overture. On the 24th day of quiet, the main offensive erupted. Space itself ripped apart in the emptiness near Cadia, as the biggest Chaos armada in Imperial annals emerged from the warp in one coordinated surge. Ships of all types swarmed the sensor screens of Battlefleet Cadia's command vessel. Their shapes evaded usual identification systems, warped by warp taint into forms defying mechanical norms. Leading them were behemoths so vast that special scanners locked solely on their power outputs. These readings surpassed limits set for even the grandest Gloriana-class giants noted in ancient logs. Lord Admiral Quarren, who had led Battlefleet Cadia through ages of space combat, saw at once that a direct fight offered no path to triumph. The setups from weeks of readiness enabled an orderly retreat to backup lines, inflicting heavy losses while safeguarding key squadrons for later strikes. This approach, carried out with the exactness typical of Navy actions in the Cadia sector, turned potential instant doom into a drawn-out space conflict spanning subsequent weeks, granting vital hours for surface fortifications to finalize setups. The first space skirmish unfolded as a vista of ruin unlike any in a zone hardened by doomsday fights. Energy lances that could erase regular ships poured fire into void shields, stacked so thick they screamed of forbidden tech. Hab block-sized macro-cannon rounds hurtled through the void between fleets. Their explosive tips burst in timed volleys to batter targeted shields via focused impacts. Torpedo volleys, sanctified by both Mechanicus adepts and Mini-Storm clergy, cut glowing paths amid the wreckage-littered black, hunting weak spots in the mangled hulls of Chaos craft. Even with the Imperial sailors' masterful maneuvers and the edge from fixed defenses across the Cadia system, the harsh numbers of the fight couldn't be ignored. The Chaos Navy dwarfed Battlefleet Cadia by more than 4-1, and each ship boasted enhancements beyond mere numbers. In such odds, the managed pullback under Lord Admiral Quarren's direction reviewed retreat as an opportunity for refinement rather than outright loss. It maximized the tactical benefits extracted from unavoidable setbacks on the battlefield, safeguarding assets for redeployment at more favorable moments. As the Imperial fleet pulled back to fallback strongholds, the Chaos Armada secured a foothold in orbit over Cadia proper and initiated descent maneuvers of extraordinary magnitude. Thunderhawk gunships and boarding craft plunged through the amethyst-hued atmosphere in overwhelming quantities, their re-entry generating noticeable ripples that could be seen from the ground below. Surface-to-air emplacements targeted these invaders following established targeting protocols, prioritizing ships that emitted readings indicative of leadership roles or elite combat functions. While this barrage achieved notable successes on their own merits, it fell short against the torrent of assailants pouring in. The ensuing land battle sprawled over vast terrains that challenged comprehension, even for a planet drilled in handling colossal conflicts. Initial strikes hit the peripheral settlements of Cassis, Dra, Jark, and Tyrok in synchronized attacks that hinted at a level of unity unlikely for troops fueled by the disordered urges of the ruinous powers. Guardsmen had foreseen such tactics from studies of prior Abaddon's incursions, yet the attacker's execution displayed a sharpness and strategic depth that surpassed past records. Most alarming were the tailored squads aimed at crippling particular fortifications, implying reconnaissance efforts that pierced Cadian safeguards more deeply than feasible. Cassandra succumbed after just 27 hours of bombardment. Its inhabitants carried out planned retreats that saved roughly 63% of the garrison, while triggering demolition charges to withhold vital supplies once breach was certain. Khazarjark endured for 72 hours until focused strikes on its energy barriers opened gaps, compelling a comparable pullout. Khazar Tyrok, aided by natural choke points that funneled foes into preset ambushes, outlasted estimates for the opening phase, though updates warned of dwindling supplies, forecasting collapse in the next round of fighting. Though these defeats carried heavy weight in raw numbers, they fit within the forecasts woven into the grand defensive blueprint. Cadian warfighting principles, honed over thousands of years of hard-won lessons, accepted that not every position could endure a focused onslaught of that intensity. The goal shifted to managed erosion, inflicting the heaviest toll on invaders while holding back essential strengths for pivotal clashes ahead. This approach, carried out with the clockwork efficiency typical of Cadian commands, reframed seeming reversals as building blocks in a larger plan hidden from the enemy's sight. During these opening clashes, the demonic incursions tied to the Chaos Horde showed a troubling shift from norms seen in earlier Black Crusades. Tiers in reality stretched further than the aura around warp spawn, forming lasting zones where the rules of physics faltered. Pulls in gravity threw off artillery trajectories. Time slips hampered the sinking of infantry and armor advances, and sudden eruptions of otherworldly substances tainted safe zones without frontline contact. Such events pointed to a profound shift in how the physical and warp dimensions intertwined over Cadia, a shift that synced with erratic signals from the ancient obelisks, watched intently by uneasy tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus. The mental assaults paired with the brute force attacks revealed equal cunning. Broadcasts hijacked Imperial comms nets, not with clear messages, but with tuned audio waves that triggered targeted brain effects in those without wards. Native Cadians, tempered by constant brushes with corruption, showed stronger immunity than off-world auxiliaries, demanding sorting systems that favored mental recovery for outsiders first. Despite these defenses, severe panic episodes surged by over 2% beyond normal fight levels, overburdening medica units already overwhelmed by wounds. By the 33rd day since the first blackout, an unexpected factor joined the fray. Enormous power readings materialized at the system's fringe. Their signatures failed to match any recorded Imperial or Xenos craft, yet they pulsed with the ancient Mechanicus vaults, locked away for thousands of years, revealed long-dormant secrets. Those enigmatic Blackstone fortresses, relics of Xenos design with powers more hypothesized than proven, had stirred to life. Ancient annals tied these behemoths to Abaddon's 12th Black Crusade, the Gothic War where the despoilers seized multiple structures and unveiled fragments of their destructive potential. Their sudden emergence in the Cadia sector signaled a shift far exceeding routine conflict levels. High-level assets, typically held in reserve for game-changing strikes within the Strategium's buried chambers on Cadia, now entered the fray. Lord Castellan Creed evaluated these shifts with the cool precision that had propelled him to overall authority. Across every sector, the battlefield dynamics showed clear decline, with supply exhaustion trends crossing forecasts of the Chaos Assault's strength at thresholds forecasting total breakdown, no matter how defenses were refined. Relaying this evaluation to the officers gathered by the holographic projection console evoked not panic or rejection, but the resolute realism emblematic of Cadian officers, facing truth as the foundation for smart countermeasures, not a trigger for sentiment. The ensuing tactical realignments explained why Imperial strategists placed Creed among humanity's finest leaders. Instead of spreading forces per established protocols, he funneled them toward vital pylon arrays, favoring those whose power readings linked most tightly to the Cadian Gate's integrity. Adeptus Mechanicus investigators gained armed guards far beyond their surface battlefield value, as elite Tempestus Scion squads positioned in spots that appeared marginal to main combat areas. To those without broader vision, such redeployments seemed puzzling, yet they embodied wisdom drawn from meticulous study of patterns spanning the prior 12 Black Crusades. As these changes took shape, an unexpected ally appeared on the central battle line. Fleeing remnants of Khazar Tyrok, funneled via planned retreat paths to backup strongholds, described a dazzling glow piercing the haze of unrelenting shelling and debris. This brilliant, golden luminescence, unlike the foul violet and emerald taint of warp incursions, radiated from one focal spot close to the ruined eastern portal. Stepping forth from that brilliance was a form that evoked sacred icons from the earliest faith lessons for even the toughest soldiers. Clad in archaic plate, with luminous wings unfurling behind her, she grasped a blade of flame with purifying flames. Saint Celestine, the emperor's consort, revived by forces defying human logic, now bolstered Cadia's stand. Imperial chronicles noted her prior appearances in eras of dire crisis, even as debates raged over the divine processes behind such aid. Regardless of doctrinal debates, her tangible effects registered at once. Units near the living saints surged to efficiencies 300 to 500% above norms, while demonic foes displayed clear retreat instincts, pulling back from her aura despite strategic gains on offer. Her advent aligned with a more tangible influx of support. The Black Templars' Fourth Company, heeding psychic pleas sent prior to the comms blackout, jumped into the Cadia system and rushed to pivotal defense points. Their Thunderhawk assault craft sliced through disputed skies with the signature zeal of eternal crusaders, ignoring standard maneuvers to unleash elite superhuman firepower right where it counted most. Their timely intervention, amplified by the Saints' revelation, briefly stemmed the erosion of spirit among Cadia's forward troops. Though these boosts held tactical weight, they amounted to spot fixes in a broader campaign framework that stayed unaltered at its core. The Chaos push pressed on with deliberate rhythm, displaying unity and intent that clashed with the myth of warp-born hordes as chaotic rabble. Most alarming was the deliberate strikes on Blackstone pylons, not mere side effects of wider assaults, but deliberate aims chased with relentless focus. This emphasis, evident in various combat sectors, hinted at an enemy grasp mirroring the Mechanicus worries concerning the P-Wylon's contribution to holding the Cadian gate steady. By the 41st day of fighting, the tempo of the clashes surged to an extreme pitch. Enemy troops from the forces of chaos, who had been proceeding with calculated progress, now launched full-throttle assaults on every sector at once, forsaking any concern for holding ground or preserving supplies in order to exert crushing dominance over every fortified line. Though this shift seemed at first glance like the typical berserk rushes linked to chaos warriors, it revealed a deeper tactical intent: to flood Imperial defenses past their breaking points, forging openings via the flood of concurrent dangers instead of targeting weak spots directly. The Empire's defenders, already pushed far beyond standard limits from weeks of non-stop combat, now faced foes who disregarded their own survival or territorial gains. Chaos soldiers pushed straight into kill zones set up in advance without dodging fire, enduring devastating losses yet sustaining their push forward thanks to vast numbers alone. Armored units barreled toward barricades without accompanying foot soldiers, trading endurance for instant impact. Flyers followed dive paths that ensured their doom post-strike, valuing ordnance drops above the safety of crew or craft. In the face of this wave of self-destructive fury, even the renowned Cadian resolve began to falter. Fortifications built and upheld over hundreds of years succumbed not to clever maneuvers, but to the math of attrition, as the attackers deemed 500 dead a fair trade to erase one stronghold. Traditional assessments of troop balances became irrelevant. The Cassars, once deemed unbreachable, triggered emergency measures designed for hypotheticals too improbable to worry about. Their inhabitants pulled back to reinforced inner areas as robotic sentinels inflicted peak tolls on the encroaching hordes. While this dire crisis played out over Cadia's terrain, an unforeseen event emerged in the emptiness overhead. Sensor networks detected huge power surges at the system's boundary, signaling a warp jump of extraordinary magnitude. Empire Guardians, bracing for more chaos backups, steeled themselves for worsening odds in a perilously dire state. What actually arrived caught them off guard and altered everything. A sizable Imperial armada had at last pierced the warp storms encircling the Cadian system, its makeup suggesting it drew from various task forces in adjacent regions. This aid group, impressive by routine standards, offered only partial relief amid the Chaos Fleet's dominance. Far more crucial was the ship leading the formation. Familiar at once to Navy experts by its iconic outline, the Phalanx, venerable lead vessel of the Imperial Fists, and among the grandest in the Imperium's arsenal. Its emergence wasn't just added firepower, it marked a doctrinal shift, bringing assets surpassing standard ships and showing Space Marine dedication at full chapter level, not mere detachment. The space clash that ensued highlighted both the bravery and inherent flaws of Imperial fleet tactics against chaos, numbers of that magnitude. The incoming group followed flawless assault formations, focusing volleys to carve paths for resupply craft to deliver vital aid to Cadia's ground fighters. The Chaos Fleet, jolted by the surprise, soon adapted to the altered battlefield, leveraging their edge in quantity to hold the line while picking off key Imperial prizes. The ensuing battle sprawled through vast volumes of space in webs of maneuvers too intricate for even enhanced cogitators to map fully. Underneath this colossal orbital fray, the planetary struggle hit its pivotal turning. Following 47 days of unrelenting siege, Casraftoft, the central hub for Cadian command and home to Lord Castellan Creed's base, teetered on total breach. Its perimeter layers had fallen one by one to focused barrages. Its energy barriers strained at overload, and its stock of munitions neared empty. Non-combatants had fled via tunnel systems to backup sites, abandoning the site to troops and vital aids who pressed on defying all logic for viable defense. It was precisely at that instant of seeming collapse that Abdon at last appeared on the battlefield, not via standard orbital insertion, but via an abrupt warp emergence exactly 17 kilometers away from the main command center of Kazakh craft. The power surge from this translocation lit up sensors across the area, briefly saturating advanced scanners and generating electromagnetic interference that jammed Vox signals on numerous frequencies. Observers noted skyward phenomena piercing the constant haze of shellfire, a towering shaft of shadow that devoured light instead of scattering it, stretching from the surface up to near space in blatant defiance of established physics. Out of this unnatural void stepped the despoiler, his body a vessel for 10,000 years of seething fury. Towering over an unaugmented space marine by double, he wore archaic Terminator plate etched with runes from tongues unfit for mortal minds. In his grasp was the demon blade Draconyen, its keen edge appearing to slice through the fabric of existence. Abdon stood as the utter negation of all that Cadia had defended during its endless watch. His arrival shifted the fight from tactical clash to a profound clash of irreconcilable powers, the raw spite of chaos versus the refined resolve of humanity's guardians. Abdon's entrance carried repercussions far beyond mere symbolism. Chaos troops in the vicinity shifted their conduct right away, escalating from fierce pushes to reckless fervor, prioritizing breaches over any territorial gains. Warp incursions multiplied exponentially, with reality warping effects growing from isolated quirks into vast linked zones spanning much of the combat area. Of greatest alarm were the power variances spotted at adjacent pylon arrays, where sensors picked up resonant instabilities, hinting at deep meddling with the age-old edifice's core functions. Inside Kazakh craft's strategium, Lord Castellan Creed evaluated these shifts with the unflinching scrutiny he'd shown all through the war. He pondered the battlefield ramifications of Abdon's direct involvement, the rationale for his choice of this exact spot and timing, and the link between his advent and the pylon anomalies. These elements together pointed to aims transcending typical warfare. The despoiler hadn't deployed his corporeal form just to direct a world conquest, no matter Cadia's iconic value. Deeper motives propelled him, motives tied to the Blackstone pylons, whose essence and role stayed partially enigmatic despite ages of examination. While Creed devised countermeasures drawing from this insight, updates from high orbit brought fresh escalations with dire consequences. The Blackstone fortresses, stationed until now at the system's fringe, had initiated synchronized advances toward Cadia proper. Their power profiles, already defying standard metrics, were ramping up in tandem with the worsening pylon disturbances planet-wide. Tech priests tracking the event's calculated linkage ratios above 0.97, signaling almost flawless alignment between the inbound bastions and the ground-based relics, even without evident ties linking them. The planet killer had entered the fray. This relic of antiquity and dread beyond mortal grasp had joined prior Black Crusades. It had proven its orb-shattering might on minor worlds, yet never fully loosed against a bastion like Cadia. Traveling amid the Blackstone fortresses, whose emissions resonated in harmony with its own, this hinted at deploying elite tools for missions of utmost gravity. No strategist versed in the annals could misread the signs. Abaddon sought not just Cadia's fall, but its total erasure, sweeping away the bastion that had thwarted him over 10 millennia of venom. Word of this spread via encrypted lines to all Cadian command nodes, reframing the mission from routine holdout to outright survival. Every available asset funneled into one goal: thwarting Abaddon's scheme against the Blackstone pylons. The specifics were murky, yet the ties among the despoilers' bodily arrival, the planet killer's advance, and Blackstone bastions, along with the growing interference in pylon power flows, pointed to an organized assault driven by unmistakable intent. That intent, regardless of its exact methods, posed a danger not just to Cadia, but possibly to the core integrity of the Cadian portal as well. High in the purple heavens over Cassar, as corrupted warp vapors split apart under barrages of cataclysmic magnitude, ground troops caught sight of the planet destroyer's outline. Its design scorned traditional starship design, evoking more a drifting arsenal built upon a colossal core of unfathomable proportions. Positioned in geosynchronous orbit right over the area where Abaddon had appeared, bursts of energy detectable by the naked eye started arcing across its framework components, escalating toward full power in a deliberate sequence that hinted at ceremony alongside engineering. The ultimate showdown between Cadia and its timeless foe was underway. Not simply a clash of armies, but a profound collision of opposing existences, human order and structure pitted against chaos's decaying spite. No matter the result, this conflict would pen the closing lines of a saga stretching across 10,000 years of resistance. The despoiler had arrived in person to direct Cadia's downfall, accompanied by armaments that could wipe planets from reality. Facing this doomsday peril were the successors to humanity's most enduring watch, their resolve unshaken by the shadow of oblivion. Within Cassar's command center, amid strategic screens depicting a crisis spiraling past salvageable bounds, Lord Castellan Creed delivered his last directives with the unflinching accuracy that had marked his command all through the fight. Cadia's protection would press on, no matter the odds, ringing every toll from the invaders until the last warrior dropped. This wasn't hope, but duty, the realization of a mission that had shaped Cadian life over 10,000 years, geared toward exactly this instant. St. Celestine's radiance pierced the orbital gloom, even as Cassar's cannons bellowed rebellion against inevitable math. Cadia, the bastion that had guarded Hell's threshold for more time than countless human societies had endured, readied itself for the ultimate defense against the focused wrath of the entity vowing its end. The destiny not only of one planet, but perhaps the entire Imperium teetered on the edge as the despoiler's arrival hit its peak. On the siege's 49th day, the shift came from frantic resistance to unavoidable ruin. Across the Cadian core regions, where once noble Khazars ruled over orderly terrains, just 3 key bastions still functioned: Khazar Kase, Khazar Galan, and Khazar Sonnen. Dividing them, lay zones fought over with such savagery that landmarks vanished under the roiling wreckage of non-stop shelling. Scans from Mechanicus scout vessels noted height shifts over 20 meters in areas hammered by focused barrages. Meanwhile, air pollution hit thresholds that would demand instant withdrawal in any scenario short of end-times conflict. Inside Khazar Case's fortified hub, where Lord Castellan Creed held tactical command amid 17 verified hits by Chaos saboteur squads, the holographic map showed defenses crumbling past standard recovery limits. Void shield units ran at 219% of their designed output, their machine souls propped up past physical tolerances via non-stop rituals from tech priest groups who ditched rigid protocols for frantic adaptations. Stocks of shells for main gun emplacements had dipped under 30% of essential levels, compelling gunnery leads to enforce harsh rationing that ranked foes by danger score instead of blanket fire coverage. Most alarming came the updates from elite Mechanicus watch units stationed at pylon arrays across surviving Imperial zones. These age-old edifices, whose real functions and workings had eluded full grasp despite ages of scrutiny, now showed power readings signaling deep unrest. Rhythmic pulses that had held steady for thousands of years of monitoring began wavering with rising force as spectral scans picked up atomic shifts in the Blackstone substance proper. Such shifts aligned exactly with the power outputs from the Blackstone bastions, holding in perfect harmony. Hovering over the fray was an orbital pattern hinting at intentional meddling instead of random mishaps. The broader strategic ramifications stretched well past the pressing battlefield dynamics. Those pylons were long recognized, though not fully comprehended, as anchors steadying the divide between normal space and the warp. Their breakdown showed up in tangible signs throughout the surviving Imperial domains. Vox signals faced growing static that jamming tech couldn't quite scrub away. Timekeeping instruments showed variances in data from various sites. These timeline glitches grew past simple calibration flaws into actual time-stretching anomalies. Worst of all, soldiers posted by crumbling pylons noted sensory warps that Commissar mind healers labeled as early signs of warp taint. Set against this mix of material decay and otherworldly rot, the Empire's fighters pressed on with the unyielding grit emblematic of Cadian combat philosophy. The stand at Cascraft captured this dogged precision amid conditions that ought to have crushed any structured fight. Each avenue and structure stood ready for layered defenses, drawn from blueprints honed over eons of city sieges. Buildings tagged as sacrificable came preloaded with blast packs, tuned to yield ideal debris fields, funneling foes into preset slaughter areas. Plumbing for water and promethium got reworked to trigger sudden deluges or fiery purges in targeted blocks on short warning. The personnel side echoed this setup with ironclad commitment. Cadian assault squads held ranks tight even as losses hit levels that would break squads from softer planets. Their training ran so deep that dying troopers kept up shooting rules right up to their last breath. Kasserkin crack teams dropped in exactly where Sims foresaw breaches about to happen. Their focused barrages briefly halted the slide by slamming massive power into pinpoint weak spots. Even non-combat staff vital to the war effort showed fighting prowess-topping standards for full-time warriors from milder societies. Such defiance wrung a heavy toll from the invaders, yet numbers proved unyielding. The chaos push kept hammering every line at once, shrugging off huge body counts like they didn't care for old-school troop-saving rules. Fanatics charged to sure doom in hordes of thousands. Their corpses piled into grim slopes over barricades, letting follow-ups grab better ground. Demon engines, their twisted forms flouting physics as blatantly as their guns shredded meat, zeroed in on shield emitters with a focused drive implying coordinated planning over wild frenzy. Traitor Astartes, clad in relic plate, scarred with the corrupted emblems of legions that betrayed the Emperor's glow 10,000 years ago, brought battle savvy that turned a brute rush into a surgical strike on exposed flaws. By the 50th day, with Sims' warning of collapse in 72 hours at the ongoing loss pace, the war's essence shifted. The pivot didn't come from standard troop moves, but from an event that laughed at logic. Over Kasser's main command hub, where the key Vox hub linked the leftover Imperial squads, existence shimmered like rippled liquid. Onlookers spoke of it in holy terms, not scientific, a gash in creation leaking glow instead of shadow, a shine that stirred hazy recollections of true sunbeams, not the foul glow of the warp or the harsh beams of war lamps. Out of this unreal blaze stepped Saint Celestine in her utmost splendor, not just there on the field anymore, but unleashed in might that dwarfed her prior showings. The aureate aura cloaking her spread in rippling rings, brushing Empire guards with a soothing heat that medics later charted as sparking real body boosts, faster recovery from injuries, sharper thinking, greater endurance against agony. Deeper still were the mind-soul impacts noted by Ministorum watchers with forward teams. Fighters bathed in the living Saint's glow hit output levels surpassing peak benchmarks. The Saint's arrival amplified baseline morale levels by 300 to 500%, with accounts uniformly portraying her as the Emperor's tangible embodiment, irrespective of the observer's doctrinal depth. This apparition aligned precisely with synchronized assaults originating from the 3 surviving Casses, sparking debates among later ecclesiastical scholars over whether it signaled tactical planning or celestial guidance, though its battlefield results were undeniably swift. Troops who had held a strictly reactive stance for 7 weeks shifted to bold offensives, focusing superior numbers on targeted portions of the Chaos barrier. From Kashyyyk, the Saint spearheaded the main push, her glow-incinerating warp spawn that neared her while her blazing blade sliced effortlessly through tainted plating and bodies alike. The push breached enemy lines in just 17 hours, forging a link between Kashyyyk and Kashyyyk Gallon that allowed shifting of assets across cut-off strongholds. Protected by joint Astartes and Kaskan guards, supply lines ferried vital munitions and aid kits as casualties retreated rearward to superior medici centers. Tech priests of the Mechanicum seized the brief respite to repair overtaxed defenses, strained to their limits after endless weeks of non-stop duty. Beyond logistics, the morale boost carried deeper weight, offering concrete proof after months of grim holding actions that Defiance still held purpose, not just duty. Chaos retaliated on day 52 with Abaddon's personal descent into the fray, forsaking his minions. Eyewitnesses from scattered scout units along the assault axis confirmed his emergence, elevating the fight from tactical clash to archetypal showdown. Towering over even an unmodified Astartes, he donned relic Terminator plate etched with runes that seared the sight of prolonged viewers. He brandished the demon blade Drachnien with the effortless skill of a veteran spanning eons of strife. The Despoiler channeled Chaos's raw spite through calculated ruthlessness, not wild fury. Wherever Abaddon strode, existence quivered in echo of his aura. The earth under his boots charred and split, not from fire, but from defiance of nature's rules. His vicinity warped the atmosphere into rippling anomalies, bewildering watchers at safe distances. Alarming data from hidden Adeptus Mechanicus sensors along his path linked his progress to surges in the fractured Blackstone pylon's output. Every footfall on Cadia jarred the relics like a deliberate sabotage, implying intent over chance. Abaddon's hands-on role yielded devastating gains for his legions right away. The hard-won Imperial corridor, upheld by exhaustive reserves, crumbled in 8 hours following his debut. Cohesive advancing squads splintered as flanks eroded under methodical strikes, deemed by reports as orchestrated unraveling more than brute power. Losses in that rout surpassed the prior 72 hours' toll, exhausting elite fighters past replenishment. St. Celestine met Abaddon head-on amid the ruins of the key Kashyyyk to Kashyyyk Gallon hub. Scarce witnesses and glitchy drone footage captured the duel, transcending mere personal brawl to embody clashing universal forces. Her luminous halo clashed against his warp-bending shroud in an unseen clash, birthing clash waves that Mechanicus experts termed, in sealed inquisitorial briefs to the Ordo Malleus, a materialized doctrinal war. The clash ended in strategic stalemate as the foes pulled back from close quarters. The clash intensified, following an exchange of strikes that irrevocably reshaped parts of the war zone through their otherworldly repercussions. The Saint withdrew to the Imperial ranks, his injuries seeping radiance instead of crimson. Meanwhile, Abaddon shifted his focus to tactical goals hidden from the view of Empire sentinels. This brief halt in close-quarters combat allowed the scattered Imperial troops a moment to regroup and fortify their barriers. Yet the overall military landscape persisted in its relentless decline, unaffected by minor battlefield maneuvers. By the 53rd day, the battered survivors of the pushback effort labored to reclaim guard lines at their starting points when an unforeseen factor joined the fray. Sensors tracking the space just above the planet picked up enormous power surges, matching the signature of warp jumps by major fleet elements. Early evaluations pegged the odds of chaos backups at over 87% based on the signatures, but events unfolded in a way that unexpectedly aided the Imperial holdouts. An Imperial rescue armada had at last broken through the storm-tossed warp zones encircling the Cadian sector, delivering provisions and fresh units that battle forecasts had deemed unattainable in practice. Though this armada qualified as formidable by standard measures, it offered only partial relief amid the Chaos Fleet's overwhelming dominance. Far more impactful stood the ship leading the formation, immediately identifiable to Imperial Navy crews by its iconic outline. The Phalanx, venerable lead vessel of the Imperial Fists chapter, and among the mightiest craft in the Empire's arsenal. Its presence signaled not just added firepower, but a profound shift in strategy, deploying resources that surpassed typical fleet resources and marking a full chapter dedication rather than a mere detachment. The ensuing space skirmish revealed both the bravery and inherent constraints of Imperial naval tactics. Facing chaos numbers of such magnitude, the rescue group followed standard assault protocols, focusing barrages to carve paths for resupply ships to deliver vital goods to Cadia's ground forces. The Chaos Fleet, jolted by this surprise, soon adapted to the altered battlefield, leveraging their superior count to enforce blockades while targeting key Imperial prizes. The battle sprawled in intricate three-way maneuvers, so intricate that even enhanced cogitators faltered in rendering full strategic overviews. Even so, the rescue armada met its core goal, forging a short-lived gap in the Chaos blockade, large enough to insert elite units straight into surviving Imperial bastions. Assault capsules and Thunderhawk assault craft plunged via disputed skies, transporting tailored support including frontline soldiers, engineering experts, medical staff, and above all, high-ranking Mechanicus priests versed in the secrets of the Blackstone spires, whose disruption lay at the heart of the escalating crisis. As the orbital duel raged overhead, the surface campaign evolved into a contest laced with ever deeper supernatural aspects. The Blackstone spires, those enigmatic relics whose full role had eluded full comprehension after countless ages of analysis, now displayed traits that defied standard empirical explanation. Power outputs varied in sequences that adepts of the Mechanicus deemed logically coherent yet mechanically unfeasible, hinting at mechanics alien to the known laws of physical reality. Even more troubling emerged the tangible signs tied to these shifts. Intricate shapes materialized unbidden on the spire's exteriors, glowing in hues spanning the spectrum, even those beyond normal human sight, yet imprinting straight onto the minds of witnesses. No analyst reviewing the full sensor logs could deny the link between these events and the growing weakness in local reality. Across zones still held by Imperial command, the fabric of existence showed mounting brittleness. Vox signals warped under time-shift distortions, with messages sometimes landing prior to dispatch or laced with details absent from the sender's intent. Pull-of-gravity irregularities skewed projectile paths in ways that evaded predictive models, compelling gunners to rely on gut instinct over computed aiming. Most alarm. Interestingly, soldiers positioned near the malfunctioning pylons experienced sensory anomalies akin to initial warp contamination, prompting shift rotations that kept personal exposure times under safe limits. In this setting of both material and otherworldly decay, the Emperor's troops pressed on with the resolute tenacity typical of Cadia's armed heritage. The stand at Kasraf embodied this unyielding precision, even amid conditions that ought to have made any structured fight untenable. Each avenue and structure was fortified for layered protection, drawing from blueprints honed over millennia of city-based combat. Though ammo stocks were severely low, distribution followed efficiency models that favored impact per round over prolonged fire. Healing supplies, overwhelmed by endless wounded arrivals for weeks past their limits, stayed operational via protocol tweaks that favored quick battlefield redeployment over full healing. From the main ops center under Kassercraft's government hub, Lord Castellan Creed directed the effort. His strategic brilliance shone in placement strategies that squeezed peak performance from shrinking supplies. Incoming orbital support got funneled exactly to hotspots, pinpointed by forecasts of foe tactics, as backup units shifted non-stop to deliver surprise pushback at spots where invaders expected easy gains. Such maneuvers, though unable to halt the overall decline, managed to stretch the fight past calculated odds, turning a likely swift downfall into a drawn-out holdout that kept inflicting heavy tolls on the assailants. By day 55, with forecasts showing the line breaking in 48 hours at prevailing loss rates, the war's character shifted once more. The shift stemmed not from standard battlefield shifts, but from the Blackstone pylons proper. Across surviving Imperial zones, these ancient monoliths all at once emitted power readings surpassing every prior record. The resonant waves, steady for thousands of years under scrutiny, now unraveled entirely as scans revealed atomic shifts in the Blackstone substance speeding up exponentially. These alterations aligned exactly with motions seen in the orbiting Blackstone bastions, hinting at a unified purpose. The real-world fallout hit right away, warping observable space across the Cadian front. Sudden warp rifts popped open in erratic spots, spewing beings that eluded standard chaos classification schemes. Time glitches grew from minor clock errors into outright timeline breaks, with small areas of space-time ticking at mismatched speeds compared to nearby zones. Gravity swings ramped up to disrupt not just trajectories, but everyday motion, forming zones where unaided human travel required gear or enhancements. Set against this unraveling of core existence, Kaisercraft's Guard reached its endgame. Energy barriers, propped up way beyond specs through non-stop fixes, started total breakdown as energy grids failed to hit required peaks. Outer lines, already pulled back in stages to save assets, splintered into lone holdouts with poor links as oversight systems crumbled from joint cyber attacks and spatial chaos. Weapon ammo for main guns hit zero, forcing a switch to hand-to-hand stands that swapped controlled volleys for frantic near-range scraps. Amid the slide, the Forge Priest squads from the aid convoy zeroed in on the pylons, ignoring routine war goals. These experts in relic tech probes and warp links used techniques born from Gothic campaign relic studies. Their aim, relayed to Lord Castellan Creed via off-grid lines, separate from main comms, wasn't to stop the pylon's breakdown, but to grasp it well enough for possible reversal or rerouting. This marked a key doctrinal turn from standard military tactics to otherworldly countermeasures. The realization that the war had evolved past mere armed clashes into an interdimensional showdown. On day 57, with Kazagan succumbing to a relentless barrage that shattered its last strongholds via overwhelming enemy numbers, the scientific squads unveiled initial results of pivotal operational value. The Blackstone obelisks weren't just malfunctioning, they were intentionally being rewritten using methods akin to the tech in the Blackstone citadels. This alteration seemed aimed at flipping their core role, turning guardians of the divide between real space and the warp into active agents of its erosion. The consequences reached well past the urgent ground fight on Cadia, possibly endangering the barrier's stability across the entire zone known as the Cadian Gate. Lord Castellan Creed, evaluating this intel with the sharp insight that defined his command during the entire offensive, grasped the dire peril it posed, not only to Cadia, but to the Imperium as a whole. The campaign's goals pivoted from routine world protection to thwarting the device Abaddon planned to unleash on the obelisks. Every leftover asset funneled into this vital aim, sidelining all lesser priorities no matter their battlefield weight. That encompassed relocation plans for troops not involved in countering the despoiler's key goal, although execution hit hard barriers due to the ruined transport networks. While these realignments rippled through the surviving Imperial ranks, Abaddon resurfaced on the main field of combat, flanked by elite Chaos squads carrying gear of clear ancient provenance. These relics, featuring designs alien to any documented tech trees from human or recognized alien origins, showed clear ties to the Blackstone substance in the obelisks. Once powered up near the structures, they produced force fields that meshed seamlessly with the obelisk's outputs, forging harmonious rhythms that sped up the rewriting observed by the Mechanicus experts. The despoiler's hands-on supervision of the effort underscored its central role in the overarching scheme of the 13th Black Crusade. The Empire's countermove marshaled every resource against this fresh paramount danger. Astartes assault teams launched from high orbit in drop pods, enduring devastating losses amid the disputed skies to land elite superhuman firepower right where it could sabotage the despoiler's scheme. Surviving Cadian troops pulled from guard duties, thinning those lines to perilous levels, yet favoring the strike against the doomsday peril over holding ground. Cannon crews unleashed their scant ammo in blanket barrages meant to obliterate the ancient devices, even if it meant harming the obelisks in the process. The consensus held that harming the stabilizers beat allowing a full reversal. The ensuing clash erupted on several planes at once within the material realm. Forces of chaos and the Imperium collided with cataclysmic ferocity, centered on the relics and the obelisks they assaulted. On a psychic level, existence turned into a battleground as the old monolith's code warped under alien sway, spawning localized rifts in reality that battered fighters from both factions impartially. Above all, the strife took on a spiritual edge when Saint Celestine returned, spearheading a group of Sisters of Battle whose devotion-fueled powers proved especially potent versus warp beasts and warp-tear anomalies. Over 17 grueling hours, this layered war storm churned without a decisive victor. Loyalist troops notched brief field wins, smashing multiple ancient tools and wiping out Chaos Adepts manning them. The despoiler waded into the fray himself whenever heavy resistance jeopardized his main plan. His solo prowess outstripped even the wildest estimates from Ordo Malleus strategists. The living saint clashed with him time and again over the broken terrain, their duels sparking tangible signs of ethereal warfare as luminous glow clashed head-on with void-bending shadow. No side claimed an enduring edge, but the nearby landscape bore lasting scars from their warring presences. By the 60th day of the blockade, as this dire struggle neared its peak, a decisive factor emerged. Sensors tracking the space around the orbit picked up enormous power surges inside the Blackstone bastions, hovering over the main battle area. This surge aligned exactly with the intensifying instability in the ground-based obelisks, hinting at a synchronized effort aimed at goals far beyond standard warfare. The power signatures didn't match any familiar armaments in the Empire's archives, yet accounts from the Gothic conflict offered enough background for an initial evaluation. The War Master planned to unleash the Blackstone Stronghold's core armaments straight at Cadia. Proof came swiftly when the bastion known as Will of Eternity, caught in chaos signals, shifted to prime firing alignment over the central obelisk array. The power buildup in its core surged to intensities that saturated the standard detection gear meant for regular weaponry, even as advanced sensor grids spotted warping of reality radiating from it in a growing bubble-like field. Such signs echoed past uses of Blackstone's stronghold armaments on world targets. Although the magnitude dwarfed all prior instances by vast degrees, the closing stages of this stage played out with grim certainty. Empire fleet units, already stretched past safe limits in clashes with the overwhelming Chaos Armada, directed every ounce of their ordnance at the Will of Eternity in a frantic bid to halt the shot. Sound strategy based on the intel at hand, yet it fell short against the bastion's built-in shields and the escorting Chaos ship's cover. The Phalanx, storied lead vessel of the Imperial Fists, launched a daring strike that highlighted both its fabled strengths and the hard boundaries of even the mightiest Empire warships against sufficiently evolved Xenos tech. As the Will of Eternity unleashed its main armament at last, the outcome defied simple labels. The ray linking the bastion to the world seemed less like a blast of force and more like a rewrite of existence itself, a tunnel of space where physics' usual rules broke down, supplanted by forces hostile to the physical realm. At the spot where this anomaly struck Cadia's crust, substances didn't just break apart, they morphed via mechanisms that baffled everyday scientific tools. The strike, targeted with precision on the key obelisk group where Abaddon's relic hunting gear had meddled, inflicted not just ruin but a deep existential gash in the world. The Blackstone obelisks hit there, already thrown off balance by the War Master's sabotage, fragmented, not only in structure but in essence, their core code unraveling into self-contradictory loops that rippled across the grid, linking every matching edifice on Cadia's face. This chain reaction, tracked by frantic Adeptus Mechanicus squads pushing untested fixes, gained speed at an alarming rate as each obelisk's breakdown piled pressure on the survivors. The models left no doubt. Total network failure loomed, unstoppable no matter the defenses. This truth hit home right away through changes visible across the Cadian front. The amethyst heavens, forever lit by the eye of terror's malignant glow, turned to inky violet laced with red streaks like blood vessels in torn tissue. The Earth quaked non-stop in quivers that readings pinned not on normal plate shifts, but on deep flaws in the globe's makeup. Worst of all, the veil separating real space from the immaterium, ever fragile near the Cadian gate, yet held by the obelisk's steadying power, started to fray outright, showing up to untrained eyes as pockets of space-time glitches spreading over the terrain. Inside the Kassercraft command vault, Lord Castellan Creed weighed these shifts with the cool logic that defined his command all through the fight. The battlefield had moved past any hope of holding steady via regular troop actions. The grand aim could no longer cling to saving Cadia as a solid body. It had to pivot to softening the fallout from its looming end. This judgment, the evaluation, disseminated to high-ranking officers via encrypted pathways detached from standard data streams, triggered the concluding stage of the Empire's maneuvers on the perishing planet. Retrieval efforts focused on key individuals and assets holding worth past the ongoing strife. Evacuation measures, launched in line with this command, encountered hurdles far exceeding routine expectations. Across the zones still under Imperial sway, transit systems had endured total breakdown after 60 days of unrelenting conflict. Orbit-bound ships on hand amounted to only a sliver of what's needed for full troop withdrawal. Such constraints demanded sorting protocols that favored elite groups, Adeptus Mechanicus squads versed in pylon lore, leadership figures bearing critical tactical insights, elite fighter squads possessing rare expertise hard to replicate via routine drills. Most Cadian troops would have to stay planetside, upholding the fight despite its ultimate pointlessness, wringing every last toll from the foe right up to the globe's collapse. St. Celestine personally oversaw parts of this rescue effort. Her glow offered not just literal light but also psychic anchoring in areas where the fabric of existence had frayed past levels safe for ordinary mortals. Directed by her, shuttles threaded through warp rifts that would otherwise block standard travel, as rescue convoys pushed across lands where natural laws faltered more and more. Though this aid couldn't shift the war's grand result, it safeguarded lives and expertise, vital for the Empire's later countermeasures against the fallout from Cadia's ruin. While these frantic actions played out over the fading orb, Abaddon the Despoiler watched from the Planet Killer's bridge, his icy glee stemming from a pursuit that spanned eras beyond mortal grasp. Cadia's demolition wasn't just the removal of a barrier. It marked the peak of a scheme woven through all 13 Black Crusades, each prior assault paving the way for this decisive blow, no matter the surface results. The pylons, now hurtling toward total collapse, had forever been his core aim. Their ties to the divide separating real space from the immaterium exposed a flaw that, if seized right, could reshape not only the Cadian Gate, but the entire Imperium. By the 63rd day, with the world's shell cracking along fissures aligned to the pylon's failing array, Cadia's ultimate stand took shape. Lord Castellan Creed, after directing rescues as far as the dire shortages allowed, released an edict that would etch into imperial annals as the essence of the resolve that guarded this bastion for 10,000 years of watchfulness. Cadia's leftover armed ranks, the ones transport slots couldn't reach, would press on with the battle through the end times, heedless of its hopelessness. This wasn't a blind denial of doom, but the raw core of Cadian essence, unyielding defiance no matter the odds, a trait etched into the planet from its inception. The command, relayed via crumbling comms grids to enduring outposts in held imperial lands, drew crisp confirmations true to Cadian doctrine's rigor. No dissent voiced, no queries posed, no sentiments logged in logs. Those carrying humanity's most enduring watch embraced their last task with the iron discipline that carried their forebears past 12 earlier Black Crusades. They would hold firm until holding failed, bleeding the enemy dry until the last warrior dropped or the ground crumbled under them. High overhead, in the purple gloom above Cass, as existence itself splintered onward, the Planet Killer's outline loomed over the heavens. Its design scorned typical shipbuilding, evoking less a craft than a drifting arsenal built on a heart of unfathomable bulk. As it locked into geosync right over the spot where the will of eternity unleashed its ruinous blast, power surges, clear to naked eyes, arced across its framework, ramping up to firing point with a steady rhythm hinting at ceremony as Mu. Like a relentless machine grinding toward its end, the ultimate showdown between Cadia and its timeless foe reached its predestined end. This wasn't just a battle of armies clashing on the field. It represented a profound collision of opposing essences. Humanity's structured resolve pitted against the corrosive spite of disorder. The despoiler had finally secured the prize sought through 10,000 years of animosity, shattering not only a bastion world, but the portal it safeguarded. The pylons, which had long upheld the equilibrium separating real space from the warp, crumbled in a chain reaction of ruin. Their downfall tore a gash in the fabric of existence, one that would reshape the Imperium in unforeseen yet inescapable manners. Still, amid this unparalleled catastrophe, an essence persisted that went beyond mere material survival. The unyielding drive fueling Cadian defiance over 10 millennia of watchfulness, the ironclad rejection of surrender no matter the odds. That tenacious commitment to obligation, heedless of results, stayed intact even as the ground splintered under the boots of its champions. This essence would endure beyond the shattered orb, borne onward by refugees dispersed among the stars, forming the bedrock for ongoing defiance in the shadowy times ahead. Cadia might crumble, but in a profounder way than mere maps or tangible form could convey. Cadia would persist forever. Death serves only as duty's ultimate expression. On the 65th day, Cadia perished, not as a society overrun by invaders or a populace wiped out by calamity, but as a corporeal body ripped asunder by powers defying ordinary devastation. The Blackstone pylons, those venerable edifices that had preserved the steadiness of reality for countless ages, toppled in a domino-like collapse that swept the globe akin to synaptic decay in a faltering mind. Every downfall amplified the strain on the survivors, sparking a rapid escalation to total breakdown. As the last pylon burst apart, its lattice framework breaking down into elemental fragments that vanished into oblivion, the final safeguard dividing Cadia from the abyss gave way entirely. The world's agonized spasms produced spectacles outside typical earthquake classifications. The surface split along fissures aligned exactly with the layout of the toppled pylons, forming flawless geometric patterns impossible under natural crustal shifts. Molten rock surged from these rifts, not in chaotic spews, but in precise geysers that climbed to uniform peaks before falling back in coordinated surges. The air itself divided into discernible bands, separated not by chemical makeup, but by how faithfully the laws of physics held sway in each level. Gravitational pull wavered in rhythms that Adeptus Mechanicus devices registered yet failed to forecast, spawning areas where items rose skyward, veered laterally, or hovered motionless. In the midst of this core unraveling of natural order, the flight from Cadia pressed on with frantic precision. The remaining vessels, already too few for a full populace rescue in routine scenarios, confronted malfunctions far beyond routine crisis thresholds. Guidance tech tuned for stable tri-dimensional travel faltered in plotting paths across zones where the very axes of space turned erratic. Propulsion units built for steady pull exerted themselves against oscillating forces that at times slammed ships into the expiring world or risked hurling them off course into the emptiness. Even vital sustaining systems endured extreme duress as the enveloping gases fractionated into strata with wildly altered mixes, some devoid of essentials for tech or life alike. Against such hurdles, the Imperium's withdrawal efforts forged ahead with the unswerving resolve marking humanity's grandest feats. Fleet operators devised hand-plotted trajectory tweaks when computers broke down, fine-tuning power outputs via instinct where equations dissolved amid the fraying cosmos. Medica teams devised on-the-fly air enrichments as ambient blends veered into lethal territory, repurposing gear for roles it was never intended. Above all, psychers and warp-seers, whose mental acuity ought to have overwhelmed them amid the ethereal storm, held their roles through sheer force of focus, offering direction where instruments registered nothing but turmoil. The toll on humanity from this resolve showed in quiet endurance, not outcries. Teams toiled past wounds that would sideline them in calmer times, their agony stifled not by drugs, but by rigid mental partitioning. Commanders prioritized group endurance over personal solace, accepting that individual well-being meant little amid the drive for communal persistence. They performed triage assessments that sealed the fate of certain troops to ensure survival for the rest, their faces showing utter impassivity while they assessed optimal safeguards with the same clinical focus used for rationing munitions or preserving fuel supplies. Such choices stemmed not from indifference, but from stark awareness that emotions were an indulgence too costly when existence itself frayed on the world below, where escape proved unattainable for nearly everyone. Cadia's guardians reached the concluding stage of their millennium-spanning watch. Lord Castellan Creed, after directing the removal of key assets and irreplaceable experts, delivered his last command with the unerring accuracy that defined his command during the entire conflict. The leftover armed units would persist in combat until utter breakdown made any response infeasible, wringing the highest toll from the foes even as the planet perished underfoot. This stood as no pointless act, but as core obligation upheld irrespective of conditions, resolve endured past despair or logic. The forces of disorder seized their edge amid the splintering terrain, only to face opposition that challenged any logical analysis. Cadian shock infantry upheld their ranks with rigid order despite the unstable earthquaking below, adapting their shooting stances with robotic exactness as gravitational forces wavered nearby. Casercan teams launched assaults on clusters of demon engines, turning rifts in reality into strategic edges instead of hindrances by plotting paths that accounted for shifts in natural principles. Even non-critical aid staff, those ranked low for rescue, repurposed repair gear into makeshift armaments and integrated into bulwarks following guidelines devised precisely for this scenario, the ultimate defense that Cadian lineages had trained for across ages, though no one anticipated enacting it themselves. Amid this crumbling, the Blackstone obelisks advanced their chain of breakdowns over the globe's expanse. Every downfall unleashed forces in manifestations that eluded standard categorization, spawning effects detectable on both tangible and ethereal planes. Fleeing Imperial monitors and departing ships noted illumination sequences invisible to ordinary sight, yet imprinting straight onto the mind. Shapes of geometry that altered the cognition of beholders. Vibrational tones that pulsed not via atmosphere, but via the fabric of being. Adeptus Mechanicus analysts, prioritized for extraction due to their worth, gathered readings that would engross future scholars for ages. Information depicting not just a world's demise, but a reshaping of existence. With the obelisks collapsing, the divide separating material realm and warp, ever fragile near the Cadian portal, yet upheld by the antique edifice's steadying role, eroded past any redeemable point. The breakdown emerged first as pinpoint breaches in reality, areas where natural rules varied or halted altogether, edges where corporeal and spiritual domains merged, forming settings where each coexisted at once, time warps that disordered happenings or trapped them in perpetual cycles. These irregularities, starting near fallen obelisks, proliferated and linked as the breakdown surged, forming growing webs of non-existence that devoured the solid realm like an otherworldly malignancy. Over this cataclysmic unraveling, Abaddon the Despoiler watched from the bridge of the Planet Killer, with the icy fulfillment of someone chasing one goal over spans beyond mortal grasp. Cadia's ruin marked not simply the removal of a material barrier, but the peak of a grand scheme spanning the full 13 Black Crusades. Prior incursions had all built foundations for this ultimate strike, no matter their surface results. The obelisks, now hurtling toward total instability, had forever been his chief aim. Their tie to the barrier's firmness between reality and the warp embodied a weakness that, if adeptly leveraged, could upend not only the Cadian Gate, but the entire Imperium. The Eternity's Will, that primordial Blackstone bastion whose armament had struck the decisive wound into Cadia's core, held station over the main strike area as if overseeing its aftermath. Power surged along its hull in designs echoing those from the collapsing obelisks beneath, implying a bond far beyond mere chance. This connection, as chronicled observations from Mechanicus scout vessels during their frantic climb upward, validated long-held hypotheses about the shared roots of these devices. Both the Blackstone obelisks and the Blackstone strongholds stood as relics from a society that had mastered and bent the veil, separating realities and manners the Imperium was just starting to grasp. Their functions were dictated by concepts that went beyond everyday scientific classification. On the morning of the 66th day, the final one, Cadia faced the unraveling of its planetary heart, not via ordinary geological shifts, but via otherworldly taint that warped its core essence. Adepts of the Mechanicus, using their sensor grids, picked up changes happening at the subatomic scale. Atoms were shifting into materials that defied the rules of the physical realm. This metamorphosis spread from the center in rippling layers, each one reshaping more substance into entities antagonistic to normal physics. The geometric sequence suggested the whole world would transmute in mere hours, turning humanity's steadfast bulwark against the warp into an enigma that escaped both imperial doctrine and faith-based explanations. Amid this extraordinary crumbling, the rescue efforts reached their endgame. The leftover ships, already overloaded with frantic refugees, ran last-minute pickup maneuvers to salvage the most vital elements from Cadia's ground. Carrying out these missions in a setting where basic laws of nature grew erratic highlighted the heights of the Imperium's spacefaring prowess and its core weaknesses against existential collapse outside engineered tolerances. Pilots relied on gut feeling over computations for steering. Courses were tweaked on the fly as the geometry of space warped unpredictably around the fleet. The sheer fact that any ship pulled off a successful grab under such chaos spoke volumes about human ingenuity outpacing tech constraints. Key among the late-stage escapees were figures who would turn loss into enduring heritage, lore scribes clutching data vaults packed with battle lore from 10,000 years. Their gear had been adapted to guard against warping influences that ruined typical data holds. Gene techs safeguarding genetic material from Cadian lineages, guaranteeing that the special traits honed over eras near the eye could endure even if the people themselves were lost. Above all, top commanders whose minds held strategic wisdom not fully captured in records, living vaults of lore that would shine in future wars. As the Imperium grappled with the fallout from Cadia's downfall, down on the surface where flight was out of reach for most, the closing stand of defiance played out. Signals from these fated warriors came via faltering links as standard radio waves got tangled in the spreading unreality, yet they kept the crisp accuracy of Cadian doctrine. No cries of woe tainted these last dispatches, no pleas for sympathy diluted their reports. They tracked foe positions, evaluated battlefield shifts, and updated supply levels with the unflinching rigor that defined Cadia's watch over 10,000 years. Right on the edge of oblivion, they acted as warriors, not the fallen, carrying out duty instead of dreading doom. Lord Castellan Creed embodied this resolve, directing the endgame defense from an outpost in the wreckage of Khazar's old central hub. The battlefield math left no room for false hopes about survival, yet his commands zeroed in on execution over end. Inflict heaviest casualties on invaders, adapt maneuvers for the fraying fabric of existence, mark key ammo stashes for top use. As growing rifts in reality cut off normal comms, he kept barking instructions to anyone in earshot, holding the line until his form started to unravel, halting all further efforts. His last logged phrase, snagged by a dying Vox unit just as the outpost dissolved into the void, captured the creed that had fortified Cadia through countless years of defiance. While we yet stand, we fight. With the world's framework nearing total breakdown, one last bid to snatch triumph from utter rout emerged in the emptiness overhead. The enduring remnants of Battlefleet Cadia, ships that had clung to a fierce standoff versus the overwhelming Chaos Armada across the whole withdrawal. They launched a coordinated assault that defied the inexorable march of time itself. This bold maneuver, devised and commanded by Lord Admiral Quarren from his crumbling command ship, went beyond mere strategic repositioning. It stood as a profound rejection of the foe's unchallenged victory, a grudge nurtured over 10,000 years of unrelenting enmity. The slim odds of victory, dipping far below quantifiable thresholds, mattered little when weighed against the unyielding demand that Cadia's demise exact the heaviest toll right up to its dying breath. The ensuing space clash showcased the zenith of Imperial fleet prowess alongside its profound shortcomings in the face of sufficiently evolved archotech. Capital ships and heavy cruisers followed trajectories that defied their bulk and agility constraints, as if their machine souls broke free of physical bonds through raw resolve alone. Anti-fighter turrets hit marks surpassing calculated peaks, even as their sensors warped under reality-warping influences. Above all, the bridge teams held formation via instinctive rapport when comms lines crumbled, pulling off intricate formations sans clear orders, fueled by a unity verging on hive-mind synergy. Facing this extraordinary surge of human grit, the will of eternity unleashed defenses that shattered traditional shielding norms. Protective barriers shimmered along its edges, not mere void barriers, but targeted anchors of reality, forging pockets where natural rules clamped down so fiercely that incoming ships suffered breakdowns, crossing from warped voids into rigidly normal realms. Armaments fired not via hardware prompts, but instinctive threat evaluation at velocities outpacing even cogitator limits, locking on and striking before Imperial tacticians could spot the locks. Crucially, the bastion itself flickered beyond standard dimensions, with portions vanishing and rematerializing in rhythms impossible to anticipate or block. Yet amid these insurmountable edges, the Imperial strike inflicted tangible harm. A Nova-class frigate, its engine core deliberately overloaded past safety margins by techs who stayed put amid deadly rad storms, slammed into an outer gun battery. Its captain had plotted a path exploiting the distortions to skirt the main barriers. The blast triggered a chain reaction across linked arrays, briefly weakening defenses along key ingress paths. Seizing that narrow gap, 3 Cobra-class destroyers followed one after another, each one dooming itself to widen the rift step by step. Their personnel embraced inevitable ends for a shot at real consequences. The assault's climax arrived as the Vengeance, Lord Admiral Quarren's faltering flagship, barreled straight into the gap forged by its junior escorts. The ship, ravaged past viable limits from prior hits, rammed the Blackstone fortress with enough force to burrow through several inner bulkheads before its frame gave out. The impact rippled chaos across the will of eternity, power surges dancing over its hull in signs of deep structural wounds. For an instant, it seemed the Empire's offerings could yield a genuine tactical edge against the tech gulf. That illusion faded quickly. The Blackstone fortress, bearing wounds that would obliterate any ordinary craft regardless of size, revealed regenerative powers surpassing even the wildest Adeptus Mechanicus projections. The power anomalies settled, ruined areas rebuilt via apparent atomic reshaping rather than rote patching, restoring full function in a span that made the whole self-denying barrage pointless in the end. What endured as vital wasn't the result, but the endeavor, the staunch denial of surrender amid guaranteed loss, a hallmark of Imperial defiance through the war. Beneath this last orbital fray, Cadia itself teetered on total collapse. Its surface had shattered utterly, continental slabs separating to expose the mutating heart below. Gases bled into the vacuum via these colossal rifts, forming stark plumes that stretched from the perishing globe like streams. Ice shards lingered suspended in the void. Gravitational forces shifted erratically, defying all forecasts, sometimes compressing landforms into tightly packed clusters, and at other times hurling fragments away at speeds nearing a substantial portion of light velocity. Of utmost importance, the ancient divide separating real space from the warp, upheld for thousands of years by the Blackstone forts, had utterly disintegrated, forming a lasting rift in the warp where a solid world once stood firm. The instant repercussions reached well past Cadia's borders. Across the neighboring void, existence quivered in echoed turmoil from the world's demise. Dependable warp lanes, which had enabled secure travel for ages, unraveled or reshaped themselves, making traversal via the Cadian passage untenable unless one risked a chance of warp jump mishap surpassing 97%. Psychic signals spanning various sectors suffered interference far outside normal bounds. Transmissions warped with data unoriginated by senders or rerouted to unrelated endpoints. Above all, the rift itself grew from its birthplace, birthing what later Imperial records termed the Cicatrix maledictum, a colossal warp tempest that would slice the Imperium in two. While these vast upheavals spread on a scale too immense for full oversight, Cadia's last instance unfolded in total ruin. The leftover bulk of the planet, portions not yet twisted into alien forms or scattered by tidal whims, caved in upon the altered heart. This inward fall didn't follow typical pull of gravity, but a supernatural reshaping as existence creased like folded vellum, dragging tangible elements through its warped folds. The event sped up past the grasp of monitoring devices, peaking in a contraction that briefly forged a zone of total void at the site's former location, only to burst forth once more as raw warp essence. The aftermath eluded fitting into conventional imperial doctrines of science or faith. It wasn't just rubble or vacancy, but a tear in the fabric of being, an area where the veil between planes hadn't simply weakened but vanished outright, where corporeal and ethereal domains overlapped in unity, not apart. The Cadian Gate, that slim path of comparative calm, allowing transit close to the eye of terror across endless millennia, had ceased to hold any true form. Instead, a fresh chasm gaped wide, set to reshape travel, signaling, and overall warfare across the Imperium for eras ahead. Amongst the ships that fled this unparalleled doom, bearing scant refugees amid the trillions lost, a shift took place more profound than simple bodily survival. The Cadian essence, that unique blend of steadfast determination, unyielding obligation, and total defiance against any odds, rose above the loss of its earthly root. It appeared not as vague ideal, but as actionable approach, borne ahead by those who lived to weave it into armed forces empire-wide. The signature battle strategies, leadership rights, and maneuver breakthroughs honed over 10,000 years of non-stop conflict radiated from their cradle, relayed by flesh and blood bearers who lived the tenets they shared. The clearest bearers of this legacy were the remnant Cadian battalions. These groups, some pulled out mostly whole and others pieced together from survivors on various craft, clung to their core character even after their world's end. They stuck to their classic olive and tan attire, dismantling their lasguns with the identical exactness passed down from forebears, practicing array formations crafted for bulwarks now gone. Of greater weight, they safeguarded the collective recall of their sphere, the built-up strategic lore, past insights, and societal ways that had propped up Cadia during its endless watch. Via their ongoing duty, a piece of the Bastion planet lingered past its material end. Outside these structured troops, lone Cadians dispersed through the Imperium infused their lineage into fresh settings. Commanders loaned to foreign units imported oversight techniques polished over ages of hands-on clashes with humanity's fiercest foes. Experts moved to Schola Progenium centers, passed on specialized expertise that might else have vanished. Survivors from the shattered world wandered adrift, mourning the annihilation of their home. Ordinary soldiers, relocated to reinforce depleted units in adjacent regions, shaped their fellow fighters more through visible conduct than direct guidance. Their rigorous conduct set benchmarks that uplifted nearby troops via instinctive imitation. This scattering conveyed not only tangible relics, but also elusive traditions. Gear and arms recovered amid the flight, frequently tied to unique Cadian designs, ended up stocked in depots across the segmentum. Records safeguarded by scholarly adepts offered blueprints that would shape Imperial Army manufacturing for eras ahead. Above all, the hereditary traits maintained by Mechanicus gene specialists guaranteed that the unique traits forged near the Eye of Terror, the resilience against warp taint that rendered Cadians exceptionally immune to chaos decay, would persist for later use, even as their founding populace shrank to a mere sliver of its past scale. Out of these dispersed remnants, an entity emerged that was fresh yet deeply rooted in its ancestry. The declaration, Quote, evolved from a mere battlefield update to a creed of faith, embraced by Imperial troops lacking any ties to the ruined Bastion planet. It surfaced in pious scrawls on shelter barriers spanning over 100 war zones, in creeds of fresh guard regiments, and in unsanctioned supplements to routine Imperial Guard vows. Those terms conveyed not a literal place, but a mindset. The unyielding denial of surrender, no matter the odds, which had marked Cadian life, now spread far from its cradle to embed itself empire-wide. This shift reached its fiercest form in Saint Celestine, whose arrival amid Cadia's last stand symbolized heavenly aid and the living symbol of ideals outlasting bodily survival. The living saint, re-emerging on conflict sites amid the splintered imperium, bore echoes of Cadia's soul. The steadfast resolve, the sharp focus, the rejection of loss, even as existence appeared to insist otherwise. Via her ongoing presence, the core of Cadia's legacy endured as a vital power in the Imperium, not just a faded recollection, steering outcomes in concrete ways, long after its earthly core vanished. Across the emptiness in the warped domain once called the Eye of Terror, now sprawling well past its former limits, Abaddon the Despoiler reflected on a triumph forged over 10,000 years. Cadia's obliteration marked not just the erasure of a persistent barrier, but a profound reshaping of the tactical terrain across the segmentum. The Cicatrix Maledictum, that colossal warp gale born from the world's ethereal breakup, effectively cleaved the Imperium in two, forging a divide that would gravely hinder links between its ravaged core and far-flung territories. This feat, chased with endurance beyond mortal grasp, confirmed the deliberate strategy seen in every one of the 13 Black Crusades, irrespective of their separate results. Still, amid this unparalleled success, an element lingered unfinished. The solid globe lay in ruins, its guardians slain or dispersed, its key site shifted from stronghold to rupture. Yet Cadia's notion, the principle it upheld through its endless watch, outlasted its corporeal shell. Whispers reaching back via Chaos's warped spy networks revealed that remnants bore fragments of the Bastion world's essence, grafting it into fresh settings across the Imperium. Such enduring spirit signified not a total thwarting of Abaddon's grand aim, but a tempering of his conquest. The tangible hurdle was gone, yet the intangible defiance it carried on in transformed guise. 73 days following the hush that blanketed the Cadian sector, while imperial ranks in the segmentum grappled with the fallout of this colossal calamity, an odd occurrence arose on various fronts. Units without ancestral links to Cadia started weaving its combat principles into their tactics. Leaders who had never set foot on the Bastion planet issued directives echoing its signature methods. Above all, soldiers confronting vast chaos hordes took up the mantra that had anchored Cadian defiance through 10,000 years of unrelenting strife, the stark proclamation that spurned hopelessness amid any trial. Cadia stands, not as a fixed location. It was more of a philosophical stance than a mere assertion, not a portrayal of tangible existence, but an affirmation of inner resolve. Those words held a force that extended far past their surface interpretation, converting what could have been a devastating breakdown of spirits amid an unparalleled rout into resolute endurance, even when irrefutable proof showed that traditional triumph was no longer feasible. This shift happened at the same time on distant fronts that distances ought to have made impossible to synchronize, hinting at more than just tactical shifts. It pointed to a shared mental reaction that went beyond the usual hierarchies of imperial authority and messaging systems. In the splintered Imperium that followed Cadia's demise and the rise of the Cicatrix Maledictum, such inner fortitude turned out to be worth more than any material asset or battlefield edge. The capacity to keep fighting past optimism or logic, to uphold intent when key goals lay out of reach, to draw significance from loss no matter the result, these traits shown by Cadia over its extended watch formed the bedrock for the Imperium's ongoing unity amid extreme division. The Bastion planet was gone, yet the model it set lingered after its corporeal end, guiding how the Imperium handled disasters in ways that would decide humanity's fate in the shadowy times ahead. From this perspective, the ultimate success went to neither Abaddon nor the Imperium, but to Cadia alone, to the principle it embodied across 10,000 years of unrelenting conflict. The actual world had been obliterated, its guardians dispersed or killed, its tactical role shifted from bulwark to entryway for invasion. Yet its core identity, The unyielding denial of surrender under any condition, the total devotion to obligation without regard for results, the insight that discovered value in opposition for its own sake rather than its fruits, persisted past bodily ruin. Cadia had perished, but Cadia remained everlasting in the sole realm that counted, the unified determination of humankind. That ongoing defiance, even as clear signs indicated traditional success, was unattainable. Cadia's lasting inheritance appeared not in conquest but in perseverance, not in standard wins but in rejecting the notion of loss, even when existence itself appeared to insist upon it. This inheritance radiated from the disaster's core like waves from a pebble dropped in calm waters, borne by those who escaped, their bodily relocation masking their unified spirit. Via their persistent efforts, via the standard they upheld and the wisdom they safeguarded, an essence of the Bastion world lived on after its tangible loss. Not just recollection, but a vital tenet. Not just past account, but current approach. Not just motivation, but the real-world application of principles hammered out over 10 millennia of endless strife. 707 days following Cadia's obliteration, as Imperial troops across the divided Imperium worked to set up fresh lines of defense against the swarms of chaos forces surging via the gap where the Cadian Gate had once been. A Mechanicus scouting ship noted an odd occurrence at the disaster zone. Amid the wreckage and warped spaces that signaled the planet's old spot, precise shapes emerged unbidden in three-dimensional forms, matching exactly those seen on the Blackstone fortresses in their last stages of breakdown. These forms, detectable in both material and immaterial ranges, lasted only moments before fading into the turbulent power bursts typical of the area. Their meaning stayed ambiguous, although later Mechanicus reviews proposed it might be leftover code running partial routines in a setting hostile to its intended specs. Whether this event showed a piece of Cadia's material core outlasting its evident end, a remnant of the old tech that had propped it up during its prolonged duty, or just haphazard power flares in a zone of intense spatial upheaval, stayed unresolved. What needed no decoding was the larger reality. It stood for the fact that an aspect of Cadia outlasted its physical breakup, that its impact kept showing up in ways that could be sensed despite total material devastation. The Bastion world had served not only as a spot on the map or a fortification, but as a focal hub where humankind's fierce opposition met the cosmos's basic decay, where structured discipline faced off against disordered breakdown irrespective of odds. In this ultimate view, Cadia stood for not just a celestial mass or a key site, but a notion made manifest. The principle that obligation rises above circumstance. For example, this sense of purpose stems not from results, but from the dedication alone. That defiance holds value irrespective of traditional success or failure. The concept, shaped across 10,000 years of unrelenting conflict against humanity's ultimate peril, endured the annihilation of its material form and disseminated across the Imperium right when this inner strength was desperately required. Though the Bastion planet lay in ruins, the rampart it embodied, the enduring human resolve to fight on without logic or expectation, remained unyielding. Cadia endures,